у кого шока, чтобы не было остепенения. Посмотрел, ни у кого шока нету, говорю, все, я за броневиком. Выбегаю под обстрелами за броневиком, запрыгиваю в броневик, разворачиваюсь, там с проблемами, поломал двигатель свой, переехал моторный. Представьте, обстрел идет уже, ни о чем не думаешь. И подгоняю броневик и зову всех ребят, всех, кто там был, и мы начинаем выезжать. И когда едешь в броневике, там не слышишь особо выстрелов, но ехали быстро.
As John was driven to the hospital, the German aid workers were driven back to the rendezvous point, where they were able to reunite with Dylan, Timo and Alex, before finally driving back to safety after a lull in the shelling.
After the shelling, we basically decided to get out of the city as fast as possible, mostly because of mental reasons, I guess.
John would be treated that night at a local Kherson hospital, where doctors discovered that his pelvis stopped the shrapnel in his lower abdomen, which likely saved him.
I was lucky in many ways. The shell fragment, the shrapnel, entered cleanly through my belly, around the area of my navel, at an oblique angle, and passed under the layer of muscle and tissue, then struck the edge of my pelvis and was deflected out of my body. Again, a clean entry and exit wound.
The next day, while everyone was still rattled by the previous day's events, Dylan and Alex were visiting John in the hospital when Dylan was texted a video.
Me and Alex, by the way, went to the hospital to visit John. He was pretty messed up, but he was in safe condition. And when we were talking to him and about to head out from the hospital, I get a text message from my buddy, from my good friend in Kiev. And it's a video that was very obviously the boat that we were using the day before, the red boat. And there was the white boat next to it, and it was on the exact shoreline. It was us, that was us, the aid workers on the shoreline. And it was from the perspective of a Russian drone with a rune, often used by the Nazis. I get a text message from my buddy, from my good friend in Kiev, and it's a video that was very obviously us on the boat. And then they posted this online with a message about us being special forces trying to build a bridgehead on the other side of the river. It was absolutely ridiculous. It was surreal. It was kind of hard to process. It was probably the most shocking part of the entire trip.
The video in question was posted on the Disgusting 8 Telegram channel, the social media channel for drone and artillery support elements attached to the Levadia Battalion, a private military company owned by Sergei Aksyonov. Aksyonov is the head of the Crimean Occupation Authority and was installed in 2014 after Russian forces invaded and occupied the Crimean Regional Parliament building. Aksyonov's Levadia Battalion are officially designated as reservists and formalized as the 30th Combat Army Reserve. The group also cooperates with the Russian Army's 150th Motorized Rifle Division and 205th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade. Members of the Levadia Battalion are made to sign a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense under the Combat Army Reserve program, and with PMC Convoy, a company consisting of reconnaissance and assault units led by Wagnerite Konstantin Pikolov. This isn't the first time Russia has shelled civilians and aid workers in Kherson during rescue operations. Less than 48 hours after the dam was destroyed, the Russians began to shell the city of Kherson as rescue operations were still intermittently underway, posing a danger to local aid workers. In one incident, Moshe Reuven Azman, the chief rabbi of Ukraine, and his team were shelled during an aid work operation in the city. Additional reports from Ukrainian government of the direct targeting of rescue workers, similar to what we have documented, has resulted in the deaths of both local civilians and foreign aid workers. To get a better understanding of war crimes like the targeting of civilians and rescue workers in the city, we talked to an international human rights lawyer and specialist in international humanitarian law.
So my name is Sarah Kay. I'm an international human rights lawyer. I specialize in national security and specifically hybrid warfare. And as the bodies of law emerged in the aftermath of the Second World War, we saw protection of civilians extend to specifically protected professions. And this protected profession is usually human rights defenders, journalists, such as yourselves, and anyone that works in a humanitarian capacity. So it's a violation of the laws of war, specifically through the principle of neutrality that is applying to international humanitarian law. That is the ideal that we have drafted at that time, is that if you are visibly a humanitarian worker or providing humanitarian assistance, you cannot be targeted.
I've embedded with the 1st Presidential Burvy Brigade, part of the Ukrainian National Guard near Limon, headed to a drop-off point where we'll join a BMP-2 team on a fire mission against Russian positions in the Srebrenicki forest. Located in the Luhansk region, with only 1 to 2% of the region currently unoccupied, this forest was one of the last bastions of resistance from the Ukrainian ground forces in the region.
Ми їхали на блокпост, аж туди між Донецькою і Харківською. Фотку ставили.
Kharkiv region, and then we had several months of training, regrouping, and we entered the Srebrenicki forest again in the late November last year. And since that time, the brigade is here. And me personally, I came back here in December 23 and stayed until mid-March. And now I'm here for a month. Major assaults from the Russian side were happening before the New Year's. It was like a stop because of the winter conditions. And then in spring, we managed to take a kilometer of their positions to advance together with the Azov brigade. You know Azov? Yeah.
Плюс-плюс.
Пострел!
So we gained a kilometer in the forest in April, May, and since that time it stands still for us and for everybody else mostly. So it's kind of like a stall situation and stalemate, yeah, in his part of the front. Last week, yeah, it was last week and the week before they tried to have like little assaults or like a reconnaissance assault. But we have all our positions mined in front of them. So they blew up. Also, when infantry tried to enter the trenches, our soldiers reacted, so they ran away, basically.
How long ago was that?
Last week there was this infantry assault, and 2 weeks before there was this, they had 2 tanks and then armored APC trying to enter with infantry.
Russian positions are in the forest, but have faced bitter resistance, creating a very harsh combat environment for any soldier stationed here. When the Burvy Brigade, translating into Whirlwind, first arrived in June, its attempted rotation with troops stationed here didn't go as planned. After several months of recuperation, they returned.
Okay.
Yeah, we will jump here.
So it will come here, we will jump on it and then... А то, я думав, тут якийсь бліндаж у нас чи щось. Нічого нема?
О, от.
Ну це наші?
Ні, це общі.
At the drop-off point local units use in the forest, we found bunkers with cheetah print walls, an outhouse, and even battlefield art. A torso with pubes drawn on with a Sharpie, a cross with a gas mask and charms hanging off of it. A message left behind by a previous inhabitant, signed with bullets, read, "Dear brothers and sisters in arms, we wish you a peaceful stay. Thank you for cleaning up after yourselves. We remind you that using flashlights, when not needed, making campfires, and getting drunk or high is only allowed for animals and retards." Much of the forest has been fought over many times over, doing much damage to the wildlife and burning the ground and trees. This damage is all over the forest and can only spread.
Це наше?
Soon, the BMP-2 had arrived. It was hard not to hear it coming. Dylan?
Ігор.
Павло.
Ви вже тут. Богдан. Я тут і був.
Добре, Dylan?
Соня,
То я тільки прикидую, що бумажки пишу.
добре, казав, що не зустрінемося, не зустрінемося.
Ні, я не казав такого. Ти не казав такого. Ага. Ні, дякую, я не хочу. Ми вам взяли. Хлопці, беріть. Хтось буде ще? Давайте, можемо їхати. БК. Ні, я просто питаю. Можете, не буде вам зручно. Та я зверху. Пехота и 9 человек едет. Щоб ви розуміли. Ну, буде вам зручно.
І 12.
Хотите?
Ми вивозили з цієї машини.
Куди?
Чо?
Четверо? А, ще хтось. Ви можете їхати всі, але якщо вам зручно там ззаді, отут 2 максимум і ззаді 3.
Але ж це тільки в ту сторону, вона тоді гарячий ствол буде. Це ж вопрос, да.
Тоді сядуть всі там.
Я ось думаю, може щось таке мені взяти? Ззаді місця небагато.
The BMP-2 is a Soviet-era infantry fighting vehicle that went into production during the early 1980s and in massive numbers. The BMP was supposed to provide the Soviets with the armored spine necessary for large-scale mechanized warfare. They are lightly armored, but their purpose was to quickly transport dismountable troops while providing fire support. Their high number and low armor has meant armored vehicle losses being dominated by BMPs of all variants. And all number of viral hype videos played over the widest selection of music possible, but mostly garbage. The BMP lurched forward. Off-road, a BMP can go up to 28 miles per hour, but if you're going even half that off-road, you'll have to hold on. It will easily throw you off if you aren't paying attention.
It actually feels like rodeo. I was just thinking it kicks like a mule.
And in that crater and mud-filled forest, it did buck like a bull. Sparks and soot, which covered my arms, face, and clothing, shot out of the engine of the old Soviet warhorse. It didn't scream comfort. The threat of drones in the air kept the soldiers' eyes on the sky and rifles ready. Very ready, in fact, as the rifles did misfire. Their alertness is warranted, however, with the burnt-out remains of the vehicles that came before us lining the path. The forest itself is scarred by war. The trees look increasingly stripped, branches broken and smashed, bark, roots, leaves, and grass burnt by the constant explosions which had mangled the wildlife. We had been fortunate enough that we had made it to the firing position without any of that death aimed towards us. We had arrived at the firing position after roughly an hour of riding through the scorched forest. The mission was late, starting past 9 p.m., but the long Ukrainian summer days provided enough light to operate. This is an indirect fire mission. The plan is to quickly fire at Russian positions at a distance and withdraw before the Russians can find them and hit them back. The BMP was never designed for indirect fire, but battlefield conditions has caused adaptation. The 30mm cannon let loose on enemy positions. The gun thundered off volley after volley as their rounds whizzed through the forest and shredded the trees between armies, all while the BMP commander directed the onslaught by adjusting fire through radio commands. The mission was supposed to last 10 to 15 minutes, but 20 minutes in, the smoke from the BMP fire created a light fog. Still, no response from the Russians as we hear the rounds thud and make impact. I did my best to stay near craters and tree stumps while filming, in case we were discovered and struck as the mission continued. Only after nearly a half hour had passed does the shooting stop and we're signaled, it's time to go.
Okay. Where was it? Bogdan, where'd you put it?
А можно декілька гільз з собою взяти? А можна, поїхали, якщо буде. Сюда, запрыгайте, мужики. Назад надо сюди. Тримайтесь, назад лучше садитесь, назад. Бэк. Блядь, давайте. Давай.
Jumping on the front of the BMP, heat irradiated off of its gun. I had to balance on the side of the BMP to avoid getting burnt, but would still every so often lean too close to the engine, still shooting out soot and sparks. Flashlights and the BMP's headlights led the way, keeping us on the path back to safety. Driving to and from the front always gets my nerves running, and it would be almost an hour of travel back, nearly midnight, when we got out of that forest. To support more freelance, independent war journalism like this, you can support me on Dylan Burns TV on Patreon or DylanBurns.tv by donating on my website. Thank you.
Hello. It is 7:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 7:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry about being late today. We had the same problem with YouTube chat we had with YouTube chat yesterday. And we had the same problem with trying to start up stream. For whatever reason, the Dylan Burns TV account, our main channel account, this account you see before you, that your eyes does not deceive you, is the Dylan Burns TV channel. That can broadcast everything fine. We can post. Everything looks perfectly normal with that channel. Dylan Burns Live, For whatever reason, it would not let us go live yesterday, and that's why we were not live yesterday. We were live on Twitch. We had a super secret Twitch stream. If you were there, it was cool. You know, all the hip kids were there. If you weren't there, I guess that says about whether or not you're a hip kid. Either way, the live channel's been giving us trouble. It's been giving us trouble, number one, with going live, period, but number two, with actually looking at the YouTube chat. I can see the Dylan Burns Live YouTube chat right now only because I'm signed in on my main channel account, Dylan Burns TV, and I'm gazing upon the comments in chat. Hope you're all doing well. Let me see who's in there. Marco Cat, Vicky BY6711, Hi Carby Jimmy, Lisbon Lion, 23YYZ, Nicholas Berthelson. What a name. Wasted Design, of course, Tofurkey's. Haven't heard Tofurkey's name in a long time. Anyway, what's the plan for today? Here's the plan. We're going to cover a few topics. We're going to talk about the J6 pipe bomb update, how it seemingly smashes a lot of the conspiracy theories around J6, and how I hope for immediate justice. We're going to talk about the election fallout from Tennessee, and we're going to compare the results there to results in other places as people tried to estimate whether or not the fact that the Democratic candidate that was running in Tennessee, who lost by 9 points but still swung the district 13 points in their direction, whether or not their performance was due to them being progressive or their performance was due to them not being Donald Trump, or some specific issue they ran on. And we're going to compare their results to other recent special election results. We're also going to talk about regime change in Venezuela, because we have a debate on that today. We have a big debate on whether or not we should interfere in Venezuelan politics, and we should try to seek the regime change of Nicolas Maduro, and whether or not these strikes against the drug boats off the coastline are beneficial to the United States, et cetera, et cetera. It's all Americans that are going to be on the panel, I believe. It's all Americans. So it's going to be a very domestic conversation about Venezuela, I believe. It'll be very interesting, I'm sure. Because we've got people there that are like hardcore Marxist-Leninists, and we've got people there who are hardcore Trumpers, and then we've got me. Oh, we're also going to talk about a secret transcript that has leaked to the press, which seems to show Western European leaders calling the United States a betrayer. Basically, a nation that has abandoned Ukraine, has left them to the dogs, is intending to force unfavorable terms upon them for their self-aggrandizement and personal profit, specifically the profit of people like Witkoff and Kushner. All in order to, in the direct words of Emmanuel Macron, betray Ukraine. This is reported in Der Spiegel. It has been re-upped by Christopher Miller. I think it has been re-upped by others as well. So it seems to be legitimate. And we need to talk about what these being the real beliefs of our European leaders says about this stage of the war, and whether that is a good thing or a bad thing. Obviously, someone would say, oh, it's bad if they think that America is betraying Ukraine. But another person could also say, well, that's good, because that type of realization in a political command structure could mean action. It could mean decisions taken on Ukraine that could be beneficial. And that leads us back to the conversation we had yesterday about the Russian assets and Euroclear, and whether or not they're going to go forward in 2 weeks on December 18th with the decision to seize $116 billion worth of Russian assets to both pay back Ukrainian assets, Ukrainian debts, help them pay their civil servants, and of course, support the war effort. Where do we start? The debate is in 45 minutes, so we don't have a lot of time. But I want to make sure that we can get through at least 2 news topics before we have any debate or conversation. Where do we start? You know what? Sorry, I'm piling up all the segments I want to make sure that I cover. Okay, let's start with Ukraine. I think we'll start there because I don't know if it's going to come up during today's topic. Also, if you guys wanted some at-home reading, some reading for when you guys are not watching my stream, you guys want to know the type of stuff that I am reading off stream, we bring this up on stream. Well, now I guess it's technically on stream because I'm bringing it on stream. Anyway, here it is. There is this study that the Norwegians put out that talks about the different economic outcomes for Europe, depending upon the outcome of the war. What would cost the Europeans less and what would cost the Europeans more. It was put out by the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. And it's 100 pages long. So if you want to spend a few days going through this, you really could. You can get a lot of information for all those huge nerds out there. But to make a long story short, you just need to look at this page, right? If you want to skip the introduction, everything else, and all the finer details that'll make you a real smart cookie, the real page you need to look at is right here. Military scenarios and their stream costs, and their costs. Scenario 1, Russia continues gradual advance and eventually pushes towards Dnieper River, forces a peace settlement on terms beneficial to Russia. Scenario 2, Ukraine gains superior combat power and starts to retake occupied land as in 2022. Peace agreement safeguards vital Ukrainian interests. Mind you, they put in place a general idea of what Ukraine would need in order to have superior combat power: 8 million drones, 2,000 to 3,000 pieces of artillery, 300 kilometer plus missiles, fully equipped 95 brigades, 1,000 to 2,500 battle tanks, 10,000 to 20,000 infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. This is really a dream list right here. An extended sky shield covering all of Western Ukraine. The sky shield recommendation has been an idea, and I have talked to those who are influential figures in European defense companies, as well as certain European MPs, and they have extended to me that there is some sympathy for the idea of extending Europe's air defense shield into Western Ukraine to both A, protect the refugees that have been displaced from Eastern Ukraine, but also B, to protect the investments that they're making in Ukrainian defense. Because if you make investments in the Ukrainian defense sector and then it all just blows up, well, then what the fuck was the point of any of that? And so this includes that as well. So this takes a really aggressive stance, scenario 1 and scenario 2. Well, essentially what they've come to the conclusion on is that a scenario where Ukraine wins is going to cost the Europeans a substantially smaller portion than if it was a Russian victory, at least half as much, in order to support Ukraine to gain superior combat power versus dealing with a Russian victory and them having to deal with expanding their defense sectors, expanding their armies, expanding their defense spending, and the pensions they're going to have to put out to soldiers afterwards to expand, roughly speaking, for a Russian victory in Ukraine to the Dnieper River. Now, if they talk about a comparison to any other economic crisis, the two economic crises that they put out here is the pandemic in 2020 and the Eurozone, where essentially they make the argument that Europe could make it so that dealing with the Russian invasion, dealing with the Russian threat could be less expensive for them economically than COVID, but that means investing that money now. Versus a scenario where the Russians win, you can get closer to something where it's going to cost you as much as, if not more than COVID. Anyway, it's an interesting study. I would suggest people go through it. There's a lot of assumptions that it has to make to get to the conclusions that we talked about today. There's more broken down data throughout it. I would recommend you guys go read it on your free time. Can you zoom in a touch? Sure. I can zoom in a little bit. Anyway, you could see the difference here between the scenario where Ukraine wins, quote unquote, versus when Russia wins, quote unquote, and what it would mean for cost for both countries. I mean, both for both the European continent if they win and if they don't. Anyway, I'm going to read that at another time. I think let's start with Ukraine. Okay, so there was a meeting recently between both Ukrainian and American officials to add the finer touches to the peace deal to give a proposal for the Russians for them to review. And then there was a 5-hour meeting between Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and Russian officials, including Vladimir Putin. And this is after 11 months of previous negotiations between the United States, the Russians, the Ukrainians, and other parties that have been haphazardly entered and then exited the conversation. Now, you would think that after the United States has issued roughly next to 7 to 8 red lines, where the United States has pulled the trigger on sanctions when it comes to India, leading it to be one of the highest tariffs that we currently have on any country in the world, where the average tariff rate for the United States right now under Trump is 35%. In India, it's 50%. And this is leading to the Indians to bring down the amount of Russian energy they are importing. That has happened in the last few weeks. And part of the reason why Vladimir Putin is in New Delhi, meeting with Narendra Modi and doing the whole, limousine diplomacy again, is because he wants to have that market share. And he wants to make sure that the Indians do not lose sight of the Russians as their main defense provider, as the Russians are still a priority for the Indians when it comes to getting defense parts, air defense systems. They particularly prefer the S-400s and the Russian air defense systems that have been provided to them in the past. While the Russians are obviously preoccupied with the war, the Indians also have so much of their armed forces still based off those systems. And so they are still very much interested in diplomacy with the Russians. Not to mention, there's also questions about nuclear power. There's also questions about the Indians wanting to deal with the deficit that they have, the trade deficit that they have with the Russians. There's a million different issues and reasons as to why the Indians are willing to engage with the Russians despite the invasion of Ukraine. But Trump has been able to apply enough economic pressure on this, and that was by applying basically any pressure at all, in order to get the Indians to at least reel in some of the energy imports that they're getting from the Russians that are helping to finance the war. And so you take a decision like that, and you would imagine, my goodness, if the Russians want to continue to have Trump engaged, then you would want to be on your best behavior. You would want to treat Donald Trump with respect. You would want to treat the United States with respect, and you would want to treat, therefore, her representatives with respect. But that is one signal. And the Trump administration is sending so many different signals at the same time. On top of that one sanction signal being sent, there's also the signal of our army secretary going around to European countries and saying, really sounding like all hope is lost. Their missile stockpile is growing at such a rapid rate that there's nothing you could do. You either take a bad deal now or a worse deal later. At the same time that he says that there's really nothing that they can provide to change the situation, even though experts do not necessarily universally agree with that conclusion. In fact, there are materials. It's just a question of whether or not they choose Ukraine to be an American priority, or if whether or not they want to deliver on the promises that have already been made so far. And so there's a combination of signals that could leave the Russians thinking, no matter how aggressive of your position on Trump is, and mine is pretty aggressive, that essentially makes the least risky position in any scenario. Just wait and see. Putin thinks he can wait them out. And for 11 months, that's been the case. irrespective of some of the sanctions being enforced. Finally, the majority of the time, no sanctions were enforced. And so this has led to, I think, even Vladimir Putin, after 11 months, him getting tired of the whole charade that he himself is conducting. Listen to what he said when speaking with reporters during his meetings in India. Can you talk about your meeting with Witkoff? Putin, I doubt it would interest you to hear about it, as it lasted 5 hours. Frankly, even I grew wary of it. 5 hours is too much. Look, this back and forth diplomacy is not being treated with much seriousness by Putin. It has been treated with much seriousness by Putin since the start of the process. But to talk about it like this shows that he really thinks he can close his eyes and just bat the ball back and forth. This is not necessarily possible if someone like Keith Kellogg, who was originally supposed to be leading the processes on stuff like this, was in the room. But when the Russians saw Keith Kellogg's knowledge on Russia, saw Keith Kellogg could speak Russian, saw that Keith Kellogg had an idea of America's national security interest, they very quickly protested and got Keith Kellogg out of the room. Now he is retiring in January, and it is people like Kushner and Steve Witkoff and Driscoll, individuals with not much diplomatic experience. Kushner somehow has the most of all of them, and tend to lean towards the idea of capitulation towards the Russians. And so that has led to a diplomatic effort that has been dominated by the carrot and henceforth shunned the stick. And when you're dealing with the Russians, a lot of times that could just lead to them taking that as a signal to keep pushing forward. Essentially, especially if you precipitate your diplomacy on, I am still going to put a red line here. There will still be consequences if you do X, Y, and Z, but you never deliver sufficiently on those consequences to build up the pressure to change the situation on the board, to change the chances for peace, the actual chances for peace. But we're nowhere near to that. And so the Russians at this point are just batting it back and forth, and it's deliberate. We can all see it. Ukrainian soldiers see Trump plan as capitulation, even as they dream of peace. From his position on the Eastern front lines, the original peace plan backed by President Donald J. Trump looked more like a proposal for Volodymyr's surrender. It's not a plan. It's a real capitulation. There is nothing to discuss here. A senior sergeant serving near Pokrovsk, a supply hub under intense pressure from Russian forces for some 18 months. While Ukrainian officials fought for changes to the 28-point plan that emerged last week, NBC News spoke with soldiers in the country's embattled military who expressed frustration to the idea Moscow would be handed its hardline demands, but also hoped that they might soon be able to return to their lives. I'm against giving up those parts of the Donetsk region that we still hold. Under the original proposal, they would lay down his weapon, leave the Donbass, compromising fiercely contested Donetsk and Russian-controlled Luhansk, would be recognized as de facto Russian. Of course, for me, this is a painful issue, because all of this is happening in my homeland. Now, look, they go on to have more testimony about the amount of Ukrainian soldiers that were not happy about this. But the demands that are being asked of the Ukrainians at this point are not demands that they can secede to. And the idea that is in the head of Trump's negotiators, that the scandal of corruption in Ukraine right now can be used as an opportunity to pressure them into action, is misreading the politics deathly. It's a deathly, dastardly, deathly, terrible, no good misread of the situation. In a corruption scandal, a leader like Zelensky will have much more of natural inclinations to huddle down, batten down the hatches, and do everything to clutch on. And I don't think that trying to make him make concessions on territory where many people who have been displaced will be unhappy, as they will not be able to go home, especially those who have fought for years to hold on to the land that will now be given up without a fight. It will make it more difficult for him to make those types of compromises. Not even saying that he necessarily should. And so this read of the situation has made it so something that I already didn't think had much of a chance in succeeding in the first place, I think has next to no chance of succeeding in the immediate future. If the standards are no significant long-term security guarantees, which the Russians have yet to agree to, and the Ukrainians have to give up territory that they currently hold on to. If those two standards are held on to any peace agreement, then it will fall through. And the scenario where that does fall through is what many European leaders are scared of right now. Macron warned US could betray Ukraine in leaked leaders' call. This is from Der Spiegel. Here is the full article. We must not leave Ukraine and Volodymyr alone with these guys. This is a reference to Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Let me read you, and this has a cavalcade of different European leaders. Keir Starmer wasn't involved in these conversations, though. Interesting, the lack of him here. But I wanted to read you some of the passages from this leaked transcript of many European leaders going back and forth over the threat of America's realignment away from supporting Ukraine and now seeing themselves as a mediator of no real moral or strategic or national security responsibility to support Ukraine or see that they have a good outcome, that it's necessarily our job to do that or it's in our interests. We've moved to the role of Oman as the ultimate mediator that has stopped every war but none, if you look at not really many if you look at the details, whether it's the Congo, whether it's Thailand, Cambodia. Either way, let me read you some of these passages. Macron warned Zelensky that the United States may intervene in the issue of territories without providing security guarantees and used the word betrayal. Now, this right here is talking about probably the Donetsk region and what is already occupied. So the Luhansk region, occupied parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia, Crimea, of course, the Donetsk region, and the unoccupied Donetsk region. There was rumbles that the United States government was going to announce that they recognize this territory as part of Russia as an attempt to get the Russians to agree. I said that this was not workable, and I didn't expect the United States government to do it, even though, of course, it's not impossible, considering how badly they've managed this so far. But I didn't expect them to do it, because for you to make a de facto concession to rubber stamp this type of crime in Europe, and then the war continues, would be unbelievably embarrassing. The president is already polling in the negative on the issue of foreign policy, and it is in large part because he's been unable to deliver on his promises. But if he, instead of not delivering on his promises, both gives Russia a reward for the invasion, while also simultaneously not stopping the war, and from the Russian perspective, encouraging further action, that would be bad. And there's no way to spin that to make it look good. And right now, Trump is polling -8 on foreign policy. Last time I checked, though it was weeks ago. And this is the type of thing that I could see certainly putting him in the double digits if the war rages on after he made territorial concessions to the Russians. And then, oh my God, and then he'd have to go out in public and make a defense about it. He'd have to go to the media and defend it. Pete Hegseth would. All these different leaders would have to. Marco Rubio, sickly. He would look white. He'd have to go there and do it. Keith Kellogg, he's retiring. He gets to go home. He doesn't have to share in that shame, at least immediately. My goodness. Either way, very, very interesting quote here. I think that the word betrayal, while a lot of people have gotten worked up about it, is accurate. I think some people look at politics personally and they don't look at politics nationally. And when you're talking about geopolitics, that's how other nation states look at it. I sometimes critique like the realist view of, not really looking into the political breakdown or the interworkings of a state. That's not really all that important. I think it's a big flaw in a lot of realist theorists. I think it's part of the reason why Mearsheimer has missed the mark so much. But if the Ukraine makes a deal with the United States and you don't personally agree with that deal after you were born 10 years after that deal's creation, that doesn't mean all of a sudden, if that deal is brought up, we can just say, oh, that's not our responsibility. Oh, we don't have to do that. I didn't like that. I didn't agree to it. Of course you didn't agree to it. You're not a diplomat. Just because you didn't agree to the Budapest Memorandum doesn't mean that, the nation state didn't, and that nations bet their goodwill, bet their national security, bet their safety, bet their economic security off of what we said we would do in a scenario where they were invaded in the future. And I think a lot of people view politics personally and not nationally. If from a national perspective, if you see it as a promise, that even if you don't like it, you're like, I did promise you $20. Damn, okay, fine. Okay, we got to figure it out. I'll figure out the $20. Even if you don't like it, you can understand that if you make promises, if you make commitments, that they should be fulfilled. And I'm not just talking about Budapest Memorandum, but I'm talking about 2022. We said we would stand with Ukraine as long as it takes. So if the Trump administration, after all of Europe and the United States said that, comes out and says, oh, it's taking too long, and then walks away, yeah, that's a betrayal. If our nation state declares, as long as it takes, you are going to be a member of NATO, it's just a question of when, and then we say, never mind on the when, never mind on the Budapest Memorandum and previous promises that we've made, never mind on the sacrifices to, denuclearization that you've made, never mind on everything, never mind on it all. Our promises don't matter all that much because I interpersonally don't like it. That you can't have good interstate diplomacy. Every single government's just going to be scared that the next administration is going to mean a complete redo of the entire nation's trade policy, of the entire nation's diplomatic stance, of any type of anti-terror agreements or, regulatory enforcement that you want to make between states. It's going to completely make it haphazard. So I think that some people, while I understand that the betrayal is a harsh word, I don't think that the use of the word betrayal is necessarily too much of an exaggeration. I don't think it's no. In fact, I don't think it's an exaggeration at all. Zelensky must be very careful in these coming days. The United States is betraying Ukraine and Europe. These are the sentiments expressed by European leaders, according to a transcript of a phone call between the president of France, the German chancellor, the president of Finland, the NATO secretary general. The president of Finland would be Stubb. That's the guy who plays golf with Trump all the time. And President Zelensky. Merz, this is the German chancellor, for his part, told Zelensky that, and I quote, the U.S. is playing games, both with you and with us. While Finland's president Stubb added, we cannot leave Volodymyr Zelensky alone with these two men, referring to Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and Steve Witkoff, the president's old real estate buddy, and now we'll just call him a haphazard peacemaker. So this type of language would not be in the public sphere if it wasn't for this being a secret phone call. This is not the publicly stated diplomatic positions of these countries. These are the private views of European leaders being expressed in a private setting where they didn't think this would get out there. If you compare this type of language to what these governments are saying publicly about Trump, one sounds like, one, they're ride or die Trump. The other would sound like Trump is somebody they're disgusted to even be in the room with. And this is probably a revelation, which isn't going to be that surprising to many, that the European leaders feel like they have to plug their nose to deal with the man. They think that he's terribly unreliable, that he's a backstabber, that he's playing games, that he's not able to do this diplomacy seriously, and that he's basically jerking them around. Whether or not they believe that's due to some sort of nefariousness, or whether or not that is due to some level of to just complete ignorance, we cannot say, but they feel jerked around. Now, this obviously does not speak well to transatlantic relations. But what is more interesting to me is, what does this mean? Because now that we know that these European leaders have come to that conclusion, which many of us has come to well before this point, than before this was revealed, what does that mean about the type of decision-making they're making? The type of decision-making they're making. Type of decision-making they are engaging in. What does that mean about that? Well, One could say that this is bad because obviously we've been portrayed as a bad headline, probably doesn't help much for the morale. But on the other hand, if they really think that they can no longer buck pass and pass responsibility for supporting Ukraine to the United States anymore, because the United States is, and I quote, just playing games with them, then that could push them, irrespective of their previous desire for a American-based solution to come and swoop in and save them, that they might actually have to take action. That they cannot just wait for the United States to act, that if they want there to be action, that they might have to act themselves. And some might be able to point to the recent Pearl shipments, which they've been able to coordinate with the United States, and these purchases of American gear to send over. There was another $3.5 billion agreement to do this in different tranches agreed by Norway, who signed on to 2 tranches, and a bunch of different European states, as well as the 210 billion euros that are going to be rounded up partially through the seizing of Russian assets in Europe that is going to be discussed on December 18th. Now, not all of that money is going to go, if this is decided, because the Belgians, are, due to their protectiveness of Euroclear and their country not facing any backlash as an investor capital hub, not all that money is going to go to Ukraine. Some of that money is going to go just to pay Ukraine's previous debts, because obviously Ukraine, in trying to stand up to Russia, has built quite a few of them. Some of them are also going to go towards paying Ukraine's civil service workers. But $110 billion is still meant to go out towards its defense sector, and it's going to be handed over in tranches if this decision is made on December 18th. They have waited up until now to seize these Russian assets. This would be a major move, but it also is an indication that they probably know that the United States is not going to come in with any big aid package, irrespective of a massive shift right now in Congress, which I don't see coming. They don't see coming. And anything would probably have to wait at least a year until after the midterms, which would still be difficult due to the president's veto power if he really wanted to throw a stick in things. Not to mention, control of the Senate is likely, even under some of the best democratic outcomes, to stay with the Republicans. Even if there are pro-Ukraine Republicans, the Republican Party is quite under the thumb of Donald Trump right now, and it would need a lot of shaking of that hand, Donald Trump's control of the party, for those people to move out from under it safely and feel that they can actually run for re-election. Because the loudest voices in the Republican Party right now are those who are not running for re-election. So I think that this could be an indication that Europe is reading the room more when it comes to the unreliability of the American administration. But what's interesting about this, irrespective of whether or not Europe is going to take all of the actions necessary, and I'm worried that they're not, because Italy, for example, has actually completely slammed the brakes on the program, the Pearl program, to purchase U.S. weapons to ship to Ukraine. And it was because their foreign minister said, hey, look, it's premature for us to participate in a program to buy weapons for Ukraine because there's ongoing peace negotiations. Mind you, and they don't want to make any of these purchases until those peace negotiations come to completion, until they know where they're going to go. Mind you, these peace negotiations have been going on since January of this year. If peace negotiations have been going on for 11 months, even if you expect peace negotiations to succeed at this pace, the peace negotiations will succeed in 2 goddamn years. And so in that time frame, you need ammunition to defend yourselves, because even the dimmest bulb should be able to tell that you can use that time to position in negotiations or to give up on negotiations entirely. And so this just seems like a very slick way for the Italian foreign minister to slide and slip out of their responsibility, of their commitment. And Giorgia Meloni has tried to show herself as, irrespective of her national, super nationalist and hard right bona fides, try to be supportive of Ukraine. But when it comes to actually providing Ukraine with the munitions to make the long haul, the we will be with you as long as it takes stance actually mean something, you're going to have to, it costs money. It takes effort. And if they're going to utilize Trump's piffy, unsuccessful so far peacemaking in order to get out of it, well, then the peacemaking is not just a time waster. The peacemaking is not just a dragging of feet. The peacemaking where Trump is trying to shift the responsibility for European defense back to Europe is allowing European capitals to shift the responsibility away from themselves, saying, well, look, the United States is going to solve. Wait and see. Let's wait and see. Is this kind of the behavior of vultures? Is this kind of, it's you're saying one thing, then doing another? Maybe. That's politics. One other thing, because the whole pitch from Donald Trump for the last decade in American politics on Europe has been that we're getting screwed. That the United States is not getting its fair share when it comes to defense articles, when it comes to how much we're getting paid, when it comes to how much we're paying into NATO, that we're just generally getting screwed. And the solution to this, if you're putting aside Donald Trump's like random bouts of we're going to leave NATO, XYZ, the solution has been Europe spends more, we spend less. And the even better part of that deal, for the United States at least, is when Europe spends more, they spend more in the United States. That was part of the deal that Barack Obama certainly was probably going to be a fan of. Joe Biden would be a fan of. Every American president who wants a hardy U.S. defense industry would presumably be a fan of if the Europeans are going to militarize for self-defense against a future Russian invasion or for any purpose, that they come to the United States to do it. We do things that explode pretty well. So why not go to the people who do things that explode pretty well the best? Problem is, the United States holds a lot of foreign policy sway over our defense exports. For example, when it comes to certain missile systems like the Storm Shadow that has U.S. technology in it, that's not even an American-made cruise missile. We're talking about a missile that's British, but has American components in it. They get a say, the United States gets a say in who they do and do not share that weapon with, because of the technology being shared. There's also, of course, the United States has to sign off on any exports from the United States. And so when you look at the amount of influence America has in its cooperative military industrial projects, but also anytime you just buy something straight from the United States, probably one of the most egregious examples in this war, even though it's not one of the most consequential, was probably one of the most ridiculous, is that when Trump was first coming in, the Australians were going to destroy over 30 Abrams tanks. Now, these are not state-of-the-art Abrams tanks. These are Abrams tanks that they're destroying because they're trying to phase in new tanks. But the Ukrainians say, like, look, okay, maybe not every single one of these tanks are going to work great, and some of them are going to be immediately decommissioned. But even for the ones we decommission, we can take them apart. We can use the parts because we were given over 30 Abrams tanks earlier in the war. And maybe, if nothing else, this allows us to mobilize maybe like half a dozen to a dozen more tanks on the field while having a conglomeration of parts for repairs if those tanks once again get taken off the battlefield. This is a very small-scale deal. Shouldn't seem that important. The United States moved in and blocked it. This was going to cost Australia money to destroy these tanks. This was something that was of no benefit to Australia to not send them and could only benefit Ukraine. And they blocked it as a way to add pressure. And so if you're the Europeans and you see Ukraine's defense as a critical national security priority, and you see that your shortage of propellant, these are materials to throw bombs, to throw artillery shells towards the enemy, and artillery shells generally, and the amount of drones that you're going to need in this 21st century battlefield, which is going to be drone dominated in the future, with tons and tons and tons of battlefield transparency. You see that, and you're going to think, okay, some of this might make sense to invest domestically, because not only if we're going to be investing all this money, do we want to have a certain amount of national security control over what we can and can't do with this industry, over how much we can, how much we will or will not produce, but also what we do with those munitions. So we can send them here and we won't be told by anybody else, no, you can't send them. You also want to be able to make jobs domestically. You also want that GDP increase, which is going to be something that as a politician you can go out and you can brag about. And so there's a lot of motivations outside of the national security motives for Europe to invest in their defense capacity. I just would hope, if they're taking their national defense seriously, that they do it jointly, that they don't just have every single country invest all their money in their own national domestic defense industries, when their money could be better spent getting more bang for their buck and their purchasing power, setting up some of these factories in other countries where you're going to be able to get more done for less. And when you're talking about, the defense of Europe, this is not a question about wouldn't it be nice if this was in our backyard? It's a question of, we need shells, we need them fast, we need them now, we need them to work, and we need them to get over there as soon as possible. So it's not a question of, let's have the HOA get involved. No, it's a question of national survival and Ukraine's immediate survival. So you would expect Europe to make these investments. They're starting to make some. Some of these investments are now EU-wide, and some of these investments are unilateral, with them making defense investments. A lot of them domestically, though. I hope to see more joint production in the future. But what's fascinating to me is that as Europe spends more after the United States asked them to, it seems that the response is now, well, not like that. We wanted you to spend more. We just wanted you to spend more in the United States, even though a lot of these munitions, we won't let you necessarily have all the control over it you would want. And we won't necessarily be able to tell you that you will always be able to send it to the parties that you want to send it to, like Ukraine, in case that, for example, Trump got an idea that he wanted to add a new Ukrainian pressure campaign. Top U.S. official berates Europe over cutting American industry out of defense buildup. The U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau on Wednesday slammed European NATO allies for prioritization of their own defense industry over American arms suppliers, according to 3 NATO diplomats. The intervention came during Wednesday's meeting of NATO foreign ministers, which was skipped by Landau's boss, Marco Rubio. Landau, a longtime NATO skeptic who spoke first at a closed-door meeting, told ministers not to bully his country's defense firms out of participating in Europe's rearmament. Bully. Sorry, I just can't contain myself. He then left the room soon after for other meetings, though they noted that ministers only stayed for a short time and was not unusual. Deputy Secretary Landau delivered 2 key messages. This is from the U.S. State Department in response. One is the need for Europe to turn its defense spending commitments into capabilities. The second is the protectionist and exclusionary policies that bully American companies out of the market and undermines their collective defense. What's fascinating about this is the messages that are being sent, even though, of course, the United States always wants market access. What's fascinating about this is the countenance, not only in the mood of the room, which is, oh, you need to spend more. It seems like there's an acknowledgement that there is more money being spent. Now they're saying, okay, well, make sure it turns into capability. You're not just spending a lot of money and then your purchasing power parity is just completely shot. And so you end up spending like 20 times more for an artillery shell than you could in comparison to the Russians, right? My goodness. And that's the thing that probably worries me most about European defense procurement, by the way. But the main thing was, Europe should be building up more. They should be spending more than they do. Then they do it at home after America shows itself to not be that dedicated to the transatlantic alliance as many assume them to be. And then they look around confused. And it's even more confusing to me when you consider Caroline Levin was saying this. This is the president's White House press secretary just a few days ago.
people. You know, President Trump stopped the funding of this war, but the United States is still sending or selling a big amount of weapons to NATO. We cannot do that forever, and the president wants this war to end. He is a peacetime president. That's what he's pursuing, and today he remains optimistic and hopeful, and I know our teams are working around the clock to try to get this deal to an end.
So on one hand, when you're talking about Ukraine's defensive future, they say you can't just buy our weapons for forever. But then when they were like, okay, we're going to build up our own defensive industries, it's like, well, wait a second, you should be buying from us. So the United States both wants Europe to spend more on defense, but doesn't want it to spend it at home because they want to spend it with them because they want to make all the money. And on top of making all the money, they want to be able to control when the faucet goes on and off because they understand that American defense industry dominance is what helps give America a lot of its international clout as a major arms producer, of not only one of the most major arms producer, if not the arms producer of the world, but also its best arms producer. As in, we're making some of the most high quality weapons on the planet. So I think that that this was a expectable outcome, and getting angry at the Europeans doing this seems a little silly. It's one thing to want to not be excluded in the market, but it's another to be surprised that they're going to prioritize domestic buildup when they found that they could not build basically any of the artillery shells that were needed for this modern war. There's a lot of investment into defensive factories that build very high price ticket items at a low quantity, but they're extremely expensive. When right now you do need quality weapons, you do need things with good targeting, but you need quantity and you need the propellant to get it from point A to point B. And just expecting the United States to prioritize the equipment that they're going to need for their specific threat, which is in Russia right now, when the United States is making clear that they have other interests, they have other priorities. It's just, you know, the interests do not converge, or at least according to Trumpian views of what America's security priorities are.
Burns is an immoral,
morally corrupt, bankrupt man. True, I am. How'd you figure it out? I think the debate is actually supposed to start any moment now. Any moment. So EU gets in bed with China, dollar store wins. I saw that Emmanuel Macron just met with President Xi Jinping. I did see that happened. And Emmanuel Macron supposedly did bring up the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and he wanted to see if he can get China to try to use its leverage to get Russia to end the war. But this is something that's been talked about for quite a bit, and I have yet to see it delivered on. So until I see, you know, some realistic movement there, it's just talk. But also, Europe wants Chinese investment. And right now, Trump is not really doing much to dissuade the economic partnership. Okay, where do we jump in here? Where are we jumping? I think there might be like a secret room. Who are we debating? We're debating a bunch of people. There's going to be a Gibbs program. Admiral Gibbs. "12 months later, and the Trump admin finally finds out the status quo was the status quo." I know it was faster than I expected. The only debate panel. We have entered an age of drought when it comes to the panels. An age of drought. An age of destitution. Oh, I didn't mention this. Maybe I should have at an earlier point. Zelensky posted my pictures today. So today was the day of remembrance for like the artillery forces and missile forces, and he made a post about it. Today is the day of missile and artillery forces, the day to honor those who reliably hold our positions every single day with their precision and endurance. Our artillery and missile forces personally deliver strikes, weaken the invader, and cover our infantry, and their work makes it possible to halt enemy breakthroughs and save the lives of their brothers and sisters in arms. Every precise shot reduces the danger to our people, and he thanks them. And there's some cool pictures here, and then there's mine. This is my picture I took on the Pokrovsk front in October, a few months ago. That interesting? Something. Officially a Ukrainian state asset. Maybe I'm gonna jump in the waiting room. I saying any VC. Jump in any VC.
There we go. Mic check.
1, 2.
Grid 1 is gay. Okay, it works.
Got it.
What?
I was just mic checking.
You were. Which mic were you checking?
Well, I suppose
Iron
both
Mike,
bars.
Big Mike. Big Mike Obama. You checking Big Mike?
Dirty
I wouldn't.
was.
That's been checked. I think I'll trust other people's.
Tyler, you're muted, by the way, if you're talking. Yeah, no sound.
I bet it's the same for OBS too. I just did an update.
Hey, we got you. There you go. Thanks for the sub, by the way. Appreciate that. Hey, someone with as long hair as me. Look, there we go.
Hello, hello.
We have all the spectrum. How you doing? You doing all right?
Yes. Hey, is there a way to just mute all the little bloop 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 messages in Discord?
Yeah, put it on streamer mode. I turned all that off. Thank you, man. We're about to start here in like 2 minutes. We're just getting tech stuff. 1 second.
I was over here making dingers and zingers and shit. Nobody got to hear my greatness because my mic was fucking muted.
Pobrecito.
I was talking shit about your chat. There's a little boy in there named Testy. Got smacked around. Got exposed as someone making shit up. And then after I dragged my nutsack across his bitch face, I bailed on out of there to play some Red Sack, and he's probably still seething mad. But that's why you're a viewer and I'm a speaker. Sit back and listen, bitch.
Well, unfortunately, Tyler, nobody heard that rant because I just now turned on the sound. But we're the only ones who heard that.
I'm not saying it a third time. It's so manufactured now.
I'm sure that you can type it out in chat, the transcript of it, or take a clip from your channel.
No, that kid in your chat got all the time he deserves from Papa. That's all. I educated him, and now I'm moving on.
Fantastic. All right, well, it's back to the regular schedule. I'm glad to be back. I had to take a little time off from traveling, and it was good. We had the debate con, we did the Twitch con, we did the Phoenix, the rest of the day. I'm tired, but now we're back. Thanks, Grid. Big shout out to Grid for having me host this debate con event. Want to big shout out to Grid for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was rad.
I've enjoyed it a lot. Thanks for doing that. But, all right, moving on. We're going to be talking about today on Give Me a Break, the Venezuela invasion, or if it's the Don Roe doctrine. We kind of talked about this a couple weeks ago, but there's been some significant developments since then. So let's dive into it. I'll start with you, Powder Dusty. It's your first time here. Tell us what you think, who you are, and any opening thoughts.
Thank you. My name is Taylor. My channel is The Powder Dusty. Well, I was hoping to go last. I'm coming into this a little bit cold. I mean, I think, yeah. What do I think? I think that we need to stop blowing up boats. I think that we need to stop the war on drugs because I think it's an excuse for us to. It's an excuse for whatever they're really trying to do. I don't believe that it's actually an attempt to fight drugs. But that's for Tyler. No, but that's really all I got so far. We'll see when we get into it.
All right, Mr. Non-Smoker.
Hey, twitch.tv/non_smoker. So yeah, I mean, I'm just curious to see how anybody would advocate for us to like intervene in Venezuela. Like the only way it could make sense is if, like once again, the American politics, this is like a purely partisan thing. The only way you could defend this is if you would defend Trump doing anything, and I don't see anyone making a compelling case for why we can do this without treading into ridiculous propaganda territories. So I'm kind of interested to see what other people have to say because I don't know. I know where anybody with common sense stands on the issue already.
All right. Thank you so much. Grid.
Oh, me? Cool. Got it. All right. So I'm Grid One Motorsports. I am an unreasonable man in most places. Otherwise, you can find me. I'm pretty easy to find. So I like this speech. I will give you the reasoning. Historical precedent says that we can blow boats out of the water. We did it back in the 1920s with rum runners. We've done it many other times throughout history. It's what we do. We don't want it coming in the country. If you keep sending shit in the country, we're going to blow your boats out of the water. It's the way it is. So we have historical precedents. There is some discussion about whether or not it's legal. We'll get into that here shortly. I'm sure. I personally think we're in kind of a gray area. I would like it to be a lot more clear, but as of right now, we have historical precedents to blow boats out of the water, and let's blow some boats out of the water. It's an easy thing for Venezuela to fix. Don't send fucking boats full of drugs over, and we won't blow them up. It's a real simple thing. Super easy. Simple, easy to remember. That's me. Anyway, gotcha.
All right, thank you so much. All right, Mr. Dylan Burns. Also, guys, if you don't know Dylan Burns, we just reviewed his newest documentary on Tuesday, and I really enjoyed it, by the way. It's got a lot of good on-the-ground footage and shows the civilian life and then the action with the soldiers, and it's real good. I really enjoyed it, Dylan. You do good work. I hope you keep it up. But, what are your opening thoughts here? And I'm going to post a link in chat, guys, so check it out. But go ahead.
Thank you, my fellow long-haired brother. I do appreciate that. My opening thoughts. So I don't think this has much to do with drugs. I do think that Trump doesn't like drugs. I think most people don't like the importation of drugs. But Venezuela is not a drug-producing hotspot. It is a spot where, drugs are smuggled above the northern coastline of Venezuela to a lot of Caribbean islands. And there are a lot of other points from those Caribbean islands from there. Then they can enter the United States and the southern United States. Miami, that area and such. But to make this about drug enforcement, I think kind of obfuscates from the bigger task I think Trump has at hand, which is trying to remove Nicolas Maduro from power. Marco Rubio, who is his national security advisor and his secretary of state, which has not been done since Henry Kissinger, is a long-standing cheerleader for the Behead Maduro fan club in Washington, D.C. He has been an advocate against it for the longest time possible. And the majority of the Republican Party, irrespective of any recent, anti-interventionist bona fides that some might claim to, they are interventionists when it comes to Latin America, particularly socialist Latin American countries in American history. And it's not different today. It's still the case. And so I think this mainly has to do with removing Maduro from power. And the conversations that Donald Trump is having with Maduro, as has been recently reported by the press, seem to be around that. And so I think the question, we can have conversations about drug enforcement. We can have a conversation about bringing stuff into the country. But I think the bigger conversation is probably whether or not the United States has a right to remove Nicolas Maduro from power, and whether or not it's in America's interest to remove Nicolas Maduro from power, because that seems to be the main focus of the operation. You don't need 15,000 soldiers to do this drug enforcement operation. You don't need the General Ford. You don't need the largest aircraft carrier in America's arsenal to do that. There's an other pressure-based diplomatic effort going on here, and I hope we can talk about that.
All right, yeah, I hope we get into it. Mr. Castle.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. Gibbs. My name is Castle. You can find me on CastleGuard YT on Twitter and YouTube. I kind of lean center-left in most things with nuance, and I think this is a topic with a lot of nuance to it. I'm all for American exceptionalism and American might in that show of force to make sure that we can spread our Western values across the world. But I also think at the same time, you have to do it the right way. And for example, in Ukraine, I would love for us to help Ukraine more. And in Venezuela, I think that we're overstepping ourselves a little bit. And so in this case, I understand the need and the kind of context behind why we want to take Maduro out and why he's bad for Venezuela. But at the same time, if you look at what that would accomplish and what we've done in the past with taking leadership out of countries and the power vacuum and problems it creates thereafter once we leave, that's another problem you have to think of outside of just taking out a leader of a country like Venezuela. So, you know, when you compare it to a country like Ukraine that's being attacked, I think helping them is good. When we start attacking these boats to try to kind of show force and to show Maduro who's in charge, I don't know if that's helping the Venezuelan people. I don't know if the Venezuelan people have improved their lives since we've started doing this. And so I think, like Dylan was saying, I think we should take a more diplomatic approach at first. I think Marco Rubio mentioned this as well, is that there is a way to talk through this before we start trying to invade or bomb them on land, which I think, you know, at this point we're getting closer and closer to war, which I think was one of Trump's main things he was running on not to do. So I think the further we can stay away from an actual war, especially land war with Venezuela, the better. And I think we should look at this from a diplomatic lens as far as we can go before we take any military action.
All right, thank you so much, Anna. Last but not least, Tyler.
All right, listen, I never get to go last because I have an A name, so I get to sound like a genius here because I've heard all your thoughts and I get to like rebut them. So interventionism is based and globalism is the future. That's going to be where we start today. This is just another one of Russia and China's allies, sanction and tariff dodging trade partners that we have isolated off of the world stage. Just like Syria, just like Iran, just like Iran's 6 proxies, this is now another card being removed from the table that is allies with our actual geopolitical rivals, Russia and really China. Russia, who didn't even send troops to help out Syria, their proxy, is now sending troops to Venezuela. And what are our consequences for this? We hit Iran. We attacked them. We dropped bombs on them, the United States, and it's been 5 months, and they haven't done anything back while their nuclear facilities still sit in rubble. Non-smoker, 5 months. So we were... We've done a few
We'll
panels
push you off the wagon.
Yeah, so we know Venezuela has people that are tied in with the cartel in their government. We know the cartel of the Sun mostly is their government, and they're working with Trindagua. They have high up members of the government, high up members in the police, high up members in the military, all working with cartels. This nation, we know, is jailing its political rivals for crime or for no crimes with no trials. They're killing the political opposition, killing protesters in the street in ways that if Donald Trump did it, I'd actually be on the side of the leftists against ICE. Actually rigging elections to the point where now Maduro's been elected twice and there's no opposition that has a fair chance because of what he's doing in the country. This is just one more step toward U.S. winning the Cold War, the strategic battle of world dominance. U.S. hegemony has brought us the living standards we enjoy today and the most peaceful world we've ever had. We need to support it and back it. Diplomacy and sanctioning have been going on since Chavez, before Maduro even took office. We've sanctioned them. We've tried to make deals with them. We've tried to do all sorts of shit with them. They finally, after being sued in court 20 years later, paid some of the settlement money for all of the oil companies they just held at gunpoint and forced out that were all U.S. owned. That just happened a few years ago after a decade. The war on drugs as well. Imagine if we looked at other wars like this. Well, the war on drugs hasn't been successful. Neither have laws against murder. So, well, you know, they haven't stopped murder, so let's just make murder legal. That's just the reverse nirvana fallacy, and I expect a puddle drooling in the lap of a person that thinks like that. So come at me, entire panel. I think I insulted all of you.
Not me.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you didn't insult me, but we'll get there. We'll get there. I gotta.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So this is the amount of copium in this room right now is awesome. First of all, literally the entire country is drug smugglers. Who said they weren't drug smugglers? Or who said they weren't in the business of making drugs? They literally have entire villages that are enslaved to grow and process.
It's decentralized
of drugs.
Sort of like all the weapons
drug
of mass
networks in
destruction,
Venezuela are
right?
decentralized.
Well,
they're
my God,
libertarian.
they're decentralized. Who cares? They're fucking cartels.
It matters when that's your reason for going in to decapitate the regime. It means it won't stop the drug dealing.
Well, I like.
Well, hold on. Do you know that we have right now? Do you know that right now, since 2020, we've had actually, wait, am I wrong on that? Yeah, 2020. We've had a $15 million bounty on Maduro's head. He won't leave his country because if he does, he's dead. Somebody's going to collect the $15 million. Oh, wait, there's more. It was increased in 2025 to $25 million under the Biden administration. The bounty was raised to $25 million. And then once Trump was in office, it was increased to, in July or August, just a month or so ago, it was increased to $50 million for that dude's head. $50 million. The United States government wants Maduro so badly, they will pay you $50 million to go bring me Maduro's head. You get $50 million bucks.
Not working.
I don't understand what you're trying to say.
I want to touch on something though.
Because you're claiming that they're not narco terrorists, and we obviously are going to believe
pardoned a fucking drug lord, Juan Orlando Hernandez.
Drug lords.
Just pardoned him. Just pardoned him.
That's kind of off topic.
I did want to.
How is it off topic?
Hold on. Let me reframe this real quick. Yeah. Let me just get this reorganized real quick. I want to touch on two things here. First, I think Dusty said something earlier. He's talking about how the war on drugs hasn't worked, right? And like right now, you know what price hasn't changed in the last 40 years? Cocaine prices, the same prices they've been since the 80s. And guess what? It's the highest purity it's ever been, right? So if that tells me the war on drugs has failed miserably, right? Whenever the only thing that's hadn't had to deal with inflation is cocaine prices, and the purity's gone up. So clearly it's failed. So I definitely think it's more along the lines of there's some other agenda, which is remove Maduro, right? And I guess to my people like Dylan Castle, who are like pretty pro-Ukraine, I'm a pro-Ukraine Republican. I would think that this is exactly what Tyler said, where it's like, hey, we're taking out another domino that's tangentially related to Russia, and that's going to isolate it. And an aggressive response here means we'll probably more likely have an aggressive response against Russia long term. Do you two not see it that way?
So the way I see it compared to Ukraine is this: the Ukrainians themselves are being attacked and they're being maimed and killed. And I just think that when you start to look at another country,
so we would be taking out an ally, Russia, which hurts Russia, so which would help Ukraine.
A trade partner too, yeah.
Sure, but we're not even really helping Ukraine anymore. At least this administration isn't doing enough to help Ukraine. So I don't even know if we would be helping Ukraine if we had Russia go into sending more resources to Venezuela. At this point, we're making a deal, or at least this administration is looking to make a deal with Russia for Ukraine to give up a lot of their land. So I don't know if that's gonna help Ukraine at all. I think right now that the more that we spend money and time in Venezuela, it's not going to help as much as we think. Like, think about the outcome right now, that if we went in and we took out Maduro, we know that there are always ulterior motives with the United States and why they look to take out leaders. And it's no coincidence that Venezuela holds a ton of oil underneath their land there. So I think this is more of the administration looking to extract resources from Venezuela than actually caring about whatever drug smuggling. I mean, think about the boats that were blowing up. They're not coming to the United States. We know they're not going to, Florida or Texas or wherever. They're going to other countries where then you can make the assumption that from those places they would send drugs to the US, but they're not even within our waters. So why do we have the responsibility to take them out if they're in international waters? I don't know, Antigua, Barbados, Cuba, wherever it is, but they can't even reach the United States, so they're not even coming to our shores. So how would you say that we have the responsibility to bomb them?
From Venezuela, I think, then.
Is that your position, Dylan? Do you think that too? Like, kind of, do you echo what Cass was saying?
Well, there's a few things I wanted to respond to quickly. At the start, I was the one who said, like, I don't think this has anything to do with drugs. I don't think Venezuela is like a major drug producer. My point wasn't to say that Venezuela doesn't produce drugs, and my point was not to say that, and this is, I think, more important, Venezuela isn't a major passageway. You could say like a conveyor belt for drugs to make its way to the Caribbean, and then from there go to other markets, be it the United States, be it in the Caribbean itself, be it elsewhere. What I will say is that I don't think Venezuela, in comparison to Colombia, in comparison to the man that Donald Trump just pardoned, in comparison to any other number of like South American leaders or governments, is particularly egregiously engaged in the crime of drug smuggling. And I especially don't think that a quick strike plan is going to eliminate that drug production, because as Non-Smoker said earlier, drug production in the country is heavily decentralized. You take out the leadership, what you're going to do is you're going to allow the decentralized drug market to be able to come up to whatever the new leadership is going to be it capitalist, be it socialist, be it just a random thug. They're going to come to them and say, we'll make a deal with you. And that same deal, I think, will continue. So the goal would hopefully be from the United States is that you replace Maduro with somebody who will crusade in a war against drugs. But that requires a lot more than just blowing something up. That requires us taking the investment to actually go in there and make sure stuff stays stable, that there's elections, that things go the way that we want them to go. Like, there's so much that you have to invest in past that point than the idea of just like a few bombing runs, which is being floated around right now. Even if you diplomatically negotiate Maduro out of there.
And if I can, their drug production is a domestic issue anyways. It's not our issue. I don't see why we would be blowing up random boats and saying, oh, we think that they're drug boats, when we were spent decades guarding poppy fields in the Middle East.
And as to answer
they don't
Gibbs's
care about
question,
drugs.
I'm sorry, I don't want to take the stage too much, but Gibbs asked me a question on the it was on Ukraine and whether this like knocks over another domino. Look, it would be, there is a truth to the idea that if the United States is not giving Ukraine the physical tools to apply pressure on the battlefield, how much does tipping over another domino really do for Ukraine? Well, there is still some room for assistance. Number one, as has been brought up before, Venezuela has a lot of oil. Venezuela has a lot of energy. And if you are able to open that up to markets that previously it was not open up to, that were previously dependent upon Russian fuel and Russian energy, then you can make energy cheaper for those countries. You can make it so that they have more providers, and you can make it so that their energy markets are more flexible and are more strong in the aftermath of cutting off Russian fuel. You also get rid of a Russian ally in South America, further isolating Cuba, if that is of the interest of other people. But I think like most directly tied to Ukraine, it would probably be the fuel. It would probably be that being opened up. But that's going to take years of investment and reform. And it's, I mean, like the Venezuelan energy system is like, it used to be a kind of a wonder of South America. It's what helped fund all of their social programs. Now it's garbage. It's derelict. It's not doing fantastic. And so it's not like we go to Venezuela and we turn off the socialism switch and then the fuel explodes and then we all have access to that. It's going to take years. And so even though it could help Europe right now, it's probably going to help Europe even if Maduro collapsed 3, 4, or 5 years down the line?
Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's very capital intensive to try to modernize Venezuela's oil production. So, like, the assumption that, okay, well, we decapitate the regime and, like, let's just make all the assumptions, right? Like, anyone loyal to Maduro is immediately either, I don't know, like extradited or killed or whatever, or jailed. They're all done away with. There's a lot of problems within Venezuela domestically that need to be resolved, which is going to involve like a prolonged, investment of time, money, resources, troops, etc. from the United States. I mean, you can make the very obvious argument that all of those resources could be best utilized elsewhere. But there's also something to the idea that, like, maybe you wouldn't get a maximal return on investment even doing all of that stuff in the best case scenario, because as Dylan said, in the time it would take to modernize Venezuela's oil production, I think the benefits, again, would be years and years down the line. So, look, I actually kind of want to shift this a little bit and try to point out that I think this is more of an economic war against China. China is the primary importer of Venezuela's oil. So if the idea is, well, we want to, destroy Venezuela's ability to export oil, and then whatever happens to the Venezuelan oil for the time being, who knows, who cares, let them rebuild it under some sort of like happy, I don't know, think tanky regime that we like, and maybe they'll figure it out years down the line, but we just want to cut off their oil supply to our adversaries. It's really going to hurt China, not as much as it's going to hurt Russia, who is a minor importer of Venezuelan oil. I also think another wrinkle to this that a lot of people don't talk about is the rare earths.
I would agree with the analysis that as far as trying to hurt Ukraine, I don't think that, or hurt Russia in the Ukraine war, I think it does very minimal to nothing for that to happen. I don't think Russia gets basically any oil. We actually still get oil from Venezuela through Chevron. Chevron has an agreement with Venezuela, and we still buy. I don't know how much. I could grok it up really quick, but I'm sure you can too. As much as we just don't get as much as we were. I don't know how much the equipment issues are right now in Venezuela. Obviously, it's been 20 odd years, that it's been, kind of jacked up. And of course, obviously, there's a serious issue with, knowledgeable people to run it. I don't know that they even have any, honestly, but it's a good pivot, but I don't know that it doesn't hurt us because we can still buy oil from through Chevron. We're not paying any more for it than we would anywhere else. And the Chinese do get the bulk of Venezuela's exports of oil.
Hold on. No, well, I'm going to go with you, Tyler, but like
that doesn't hurt Russia.
Touch on something at the end, which is the rare earth minerals, and I think that, and he brought up China, and I wanted to address that. I think this is maybe won't directly affect Russia tomorrow if we took out Venezuela. I think Dylan kind of went pretty in depth on why it's going to be a long-term investment it would be in that case. But I think that it is like a taking out of a member of this like alliance that's kind of like a raid against the U.S., right? That's kind of like with what you call it BRICS or whatever y'all want to call it, the new axis of evil. It seems like they're like aligned or tangentially aligned, and it seems it's like a step in that, whether it's China or whether it's Russia, they're both in cahoots. It seems like eliminating, and the rare earth minerals I think are becoming I don't think are talked about enough. I think that non-smoker, I don't know if that's for sure where you were going with that, but I think that's a big factor. But I'll let do you have anything else you wanted to add on that? Then I'm going to go to Tyler.
I mean, just to finish quickly, that was, I thought, part of the calculus initially was like, okay, well, again, decapitate Maduro, right? And then just reap the rewards, take all of the natural resources you can. I mean, that's what a lot of you guys always advocate for with the pro-interventionism. And
literally nobody in
kind
this
of
conversation.
I'm referencing to prior debates, but
I would say
at least in the case of Venezuela, a lot of the rare earths are controlled by, I don't know if it's right to say ironically or not, but also criminal gangs. most of the rare earths are mined not by the regime, but like these rogue groups who mine illegally. They have no regard for the environment, and they end up kind of through these sort of clandestine networks shipping the rare earths onto the world market, where they sort of cycle all over the place. And I only bring that up to say that the notion that crushing Maduro would mean just getting all of Venezuela's riches, including the rare earths, it's really not that simple. The rare earths production is not even controlled by Maduro. It's controlled by all these renegade little groups. And, you know, any removal, like, it's very similar in this way to Syria. Any remover of like a dictator or a dictatorial figure inevitably leads to this struggle of factions, each with their own interest. And it's then our duty, in a way, to clean that up if we intend to reap any sort of material rewards from this, which I think that the people who are planning all of this are aware of.
Do you think that's the goal? Because this seems like a pivot.
No,
It just seems like a pivot. Do you think it's the United States' goal to clean up Venezuela because we somehow think we're going to get something out of it? Or do you think that it's just as simple as we're tired of 100,000, 200,000 deaths a year from fentanyl that comes?
It's not about fentanyl either. It's not about fentanyl either. Because it's not gonna make a significant dent, first of all, in fentanyl at all. I mean, Venezuela primarily is a drug route for cocaine, but in addition to that, there's massive drug dealing networks all over Latin America, which are again decentralized networks. So removing this regime is not going to stop any of that.
Hold on. See, again, you keep saying that we're removing the regime. We're blowing up literal boats filled with drugs. That means there are less drugs making it through. So
blowing up a few random people in boats is not making a significant dent.
If we wanted Maduro gone, we could literally do it in 7 hours.
Like, are you sure?
We are the United
I don't think so. We tried it in 2020. What's the bounty on his head?
Just to like give credence to something that's unrelated, but I think related at the same time. Like, maybe I don't know how to rephrase this. My brain's working slow today. But it is Rwanda deal happened today, right? And that is basically because of the rare earth minerals, right? You know, that's why he wanted to do it. That's why he backed it. And he took it against the Rwanda side, against the Congo, basically, who's a Russian ally. And Rwanda's taking over France's contracts and whatever. And so I almost see kind of what Tyler is bringing up. And I think it's a point to it's what Non-Spoken brought up with the rare minerals, where it's like it could be a political realignment they have taken out of things. Do you not see that, Jared? Are you sure? It's like, why?
If we were going after him to take him out, I would 100%. If we were landing troops and rolling up the shores with tanks, or we were sending in SEAL team whatever and blowing his head off in the middle of the night, if any of those things were happening, I would lend credence to what you're saying. But we're not doing that. We're simply blowing boats out of the water.
Yeah, but it's being done in conjunction with the argument that Maduro is a narco lord, and it's like a drug regime. And you have to understand the implication in all of this. And the reason that I would imagine we're even having this debate is because the U.S. is posturing as if there's going to be further military action that goes beyond just strikes on vessels.
Let's go to Tyler. He's going to try to get it. Go ahead, Tyler.
Okay, so
then Dylan, go ahead.
I get Dylan brought this to his oil point theory that he's trying to make. The original point that I was making prior to that about this hurting Russia and helping Ukraine was the trade route argument. It was that they have alternative trade routes that can dodge our sanctions, dodge our tariffs, and things like that. They're trading with each other. Since the war has started between Russia and Ukraine, trade has almost doubled between Russia and Venezuela. And then on top of that, so we take them out of the equation, we take Maduro out, that's potentially a shit ton less trade going on. It's not going to take all of it away, but each incremental step. And you go to Iran. When Iran and Israel were fighting in that 12-day war, Israel took out almost half of its long-range launchers. They hit drone facilities, drone part facilities, weapons facilities, rocket facilities. They took out a ton of military production that goes on in Iran. And that even if they didn't take it all out, that hurts what Iran can then turn around and sell to Russia or give to Hamas. So hitting these pipelines and taking them out is effective in all sorts of ways that hurt them in the now. And the weapons, again, is something that probably... So, again, Venezuela...
That's a much better argument.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm here for, is to make the absolute best arguments and be right 100% of the time. So thank you, Grid, for noticing. All right.
So does anybody think that we're actually doing this?
You got a 1 in 10
over
ratio
drugs?
going. You got a 1 in 10 ratio going.
Yeah.
Does anybody actually think we're
Dusty,
doing?
I want to go to Dusty, and then we'll go to Dylan. Go ahead.
Jordan, hold on.
Dylan got skipped again.
Hold on. Dusty, I got a couple more things. I was waiting for like 10 minutes. Yeah, let me get a couple more things. We were talking about Venezuela doesn't actually produce a lion's share of the drugs, a vast majority. What they do is offer safe haven to the people that are shipping the drugs.
They're a trade route.
They're Qatar for Hamas in this situation. They're offering safe haven for the people that are actually doing the bad things and the leaders and if we take out the smugglers, we're setting up deterrence. Yeah, of course, we're not going to make a dent in the global drug trade by killing a boat or two full of smugglers. It's to set up deterrence. It's establishing deterrence to tell them we're not fucking around. If we catch you, you're dying from that shit. It's already been passed.
Dude, there's shitloads of drugs still coming into America, though.
Okay,
we did not catch drugs coming into our country. We shot a boat out of the water and then said there are drugs on it. Well, we just blew it.
And we don't even really know if those are drug dealers, by the way. Can we?
I trust our intel agencies.
You do.
Yeah, I mean that's a weak argument. That's fine. But I really
17 intel agencies said that Russia hacked our election.
All right, let's go.
The same ones that said we had weapons of mass destruction, right?
All right, we're
Or that they had.
They did.
Go ahead, Dylan.
They did.
Dylan, go ahead.
Russians did interfere in our elections, but that's besides the point. There's a few.
Wait. Did we get that? Is that recorded? He just said that. Did we record that? Because
it's proven in Congress already. The Senate's got it recorded.
Oh my God!
I'm kidding.
Go ahead, Dylan.
Wait, was that recorded? Are we streaming? I was told this was a private conversation.
He's
bamboozled, bro.
Got him on record as saying that there's an election interference.
So as for the Congo and Rwanda, I just first want to throw out there, that's a war that Trump said he already solved. So I don't know why we're negotiating anything when it comes to Rwanda and the Congo. He said that war was already over, that he negotiated a peace deal, and that's fine. So I don't know why he would need a mineral deal to fix anything. As for the Venezuelans and supporting Ukraine, they produce like 740,000 barrels. That's still quite a lot. That's still something that can have an impact. But in comparison to what reserves they have under their feet, that is the necessarily global earth-shattering, like market-changing potential of having the largest reserves on the planet. It's just they've never been able to meet that because their economy isn't very well managed, to be very blunt. As for the drug smuggling here, Venezuela is cocaine smuggling, but the majority of this cocaine is being smuggled to Europe, is going to the islands and then smuggles to Europe. And so, again, I'm not saying that it's bad to stop drug smuggling. I'm not saying that, I'm against any type of enforcement, but the idea that after decades and decades of the war on drugs, us blowing up ships that are probably going to Europe, not coming to the United States, which so far have yet to really know of what impact that's had when it comes to, actually helping American citizens, helping American people who are at the other end of the needle here, at the other end of the actual drug consumption. So what are we doing here? What are we actually accomplishing by blowing up these boats? Especially since this is probably being done extra legally, which I would like to get into that conversation at some point, that it's one thing to say, hey, Congress, we're going to all come together and we're going to agree. We're just going to start blowing boats out of the water. It's not like this is something that's been done by a previous president before. This is something that Trump, as the executive, chose on his own that we were going to start doing. And Pete Hegseth has carried it out and has blown up 21 ships. And as we've talked about before, and this is the one disagreement I'm going to throw out with Tyler, that he trusts that these are drug smugglers. Rand Paul, who's not somebody I cite very often, but Rand Paul released the report recently from the Coast Guard saying that over the last year, 79% of the boats intercepted were found to be engaging in illegal, illicit drug smuggling activity, meaning that 20% of the boats that were intercepted in that time period were not engaged in illegal drug smuggling activity. We've blown up 21 boats. What's 20% of 21? I'm not saying that we know that to be the case. I'm just saying that when we have an administration that's being so untransparent about how this is happening, about who's on the ships, providing names, providing physical evidence, where they've decided to do it in one instance or in another instance, but then not to do it for the vast majority of the other instances that have not been approved by Congress, it leads to distrust. And this needs to have I mean, there's a question about whether this should be happening in the first place, but the fact that he feels so free to do this shows how much the JCPOA and other use of force for military authorization has degraded Congress's ability to just take their hand, put it on the President of the United States and say, that's not your job. That's our job. If we're going to start bombing shit, we get a say.
I would love to argue the legality of it with you, but unfortunately, it's all classified. The OLC opinion backing this is classified. All we have are hearsay from Democrats and Republicans saying what's in it, and then what it cites are other OLC opinions about Syria and Libya that we don't also have access to, unfortunately. So we don't know the legality behind it. It's hard to dispute it.
But I mean, the declaration. But let's be clear: the JCPOA authorizations we're going off of are post 9/11 JCPOA authorizations. That's going to be the final legal underpinning for this. It's going to be the idea that Nicolas Maduro is running an organization similar in nature to Al Qaeda. And that's why America, with imminence, without a declaration from Congress, has to move in and just start bombing shit. Now, whether or not you agree that we should just start blowing up these ships, that we should just start bombing Venezuela, that the president should engage in that type of behavior, the idea that these types of forces are at all equal distant from each other, even close to each other, when it comes to the motivations of what pushes a drug runner, what pushes Nicolas Maduro, and what pushes the Islamist organization Al Qaeda.
I don't disagree with.
Hold on, Grid. I want to like maybe reframe this real quick, and then I'll go to you and Destiny. I want to go to Destiny real quick because he's brought up several times. He doesn't think this is about the drugs, right? And y'all have argued the legality aspect of this, and I think it's interesting. All right, I tend to agree with you, Destiny, that it's not about the drugs, right? However, would you equate a cartel to be an equivalent organization?
But did you say Destiny a second? You said Destiny earlier too.
He said Destiny 3 times.
Yeah, I was like, when did he come on?
Am I Destiny? Am I being referred to, or who is Destiny?
No, Dusty.
Okay, Dusty. Got you.
Destiny, listen,
not Dusty. I think maybe my accent. I'm all stopped up. So
there's gonna be some memes there for sure.
Sure, yeah, they're gonna get me. It'll be like Mr. Beef stutters or some shit. It'll be fine.
That wouldn't have happened if they just allowed that cocaine to come through, right?
I'm saying, bro, the pure. Anyway, listen, yeah. So do you equate a cartel to like an equivalent danger to a terrorist organization? Because I know you're saying this is not about drugs. What do you think?
No, not at all. I think that I'm pretty libertarian. I think the war on drugs should end entirely. I think that a cartel is, first of all, a different country's problem. It's not our problem at all. I equate it more to a free market business than anything. But the point is that a cartel is not, their purpose is not to attack Americans. In fact, if they're selling product to America, they want Americans to survive. Whereas like Al Qaeda, that is their purpose and their intent. So no, not at all.
Great. Could I?
With that. Go ahead, Castle. Go ahead.
I was going to ask Grid a question because one of the arguments here is that, selling drugs to the U.S. or running a drug cartel and designating them as a terrorist is the reason why we're doing this. But if you think about it, if that were the case, then why aren't we bombing the cartels in Mexico? I mean, Mexico is, some people would call it a narco state at this point. 90% of the fentanyl is coming through
these guys want to do that too. Not to
but you're not.
But want to do that too.
But then why are we attacking? But why are we attacking Venezuelan boats with like the people who are drug running this are like?
That's like the thing these days.
Wait,
the
one more exception onto that.
Grid.
Why not also European mafios? I mean, the mafia is one of the biggest drug dealers in the world. If any of that is actually crossing the transatlantic, can we do bombing runs in Italy? Can we do bombing runs in Denmark? Where exactly
just
does
bomb
the
my
limits
block.
Of this go?
The
just
fence
bomb
is coming
Huntington
from China.
Station. There's crack dealers all over the place.
Well, we could try 30 years of diplomacy.
I'm going to answer Tyler's earlier kind of pseudo question about how he couldn't. We can't really talk because their ROEs classified to some degree, and we only know some. So what the rumor is, and I believe this, is that since these boats fly no flags, they are not considered terrorists. They're actually, and they're on the high seas. They are considered pirates. They're they are engaged in illegal activities on the high seas, and therefore that is the rumor of why we are able to go weapons free on those guys. I don't know. That seems like a reach to me, but that's the rumor. Again, you're right. It's classified. We don't actually know anything. It's just,
Can we just come on? Jesus fucking Christ. Really? Do we have to think about it this deeply? They're trying to do something that's big and flashy to look like they're making an impact, and they don't give a fuck. They don't actually give a fuck if these are really drug dealers. They care that the American people, everybody sees this on social media, and it's a big impact move. This is like classic Trump. It's not about stopping drug dealers. There's no way to even quantify it if it's had any impact on the amount of drugs coming into America. It's ridiculous to even assume that. And so the conversation shouldn't be like, is this really affecting the drug traffic? It's like, no, is this a signal that we're going to intervene in Venezuela and initiate a regime change? And it seems to be that some people believe that. I actually don't think that the Trump administration is even going to try that, by the way.
Yeah, I don't
because,
think so.
I think that the potential for success of that's very low.
I think being bald makes you think you're now Charles Xavier.
You think, hold on. You think your potential for success is very low?
I think killing Maduro is highly probable. I don't think it stops there. I think that there's a lot of research done on this, guys, that there's layers within the Venezuelan government and security apparatus that are in place just in case Maduro would fall. And it's of my opinion that you guys remember back in I think it was mid-October, there was a report in the New York Times about how supposedly Maduro offered to give up everything. He would give up oil, he would give up this and that and the other, and as long as America would not attack Venezuela. And yet nothing ever came of that, right? And you would think, if the U.S. wants regime change, Maduro's willing to surrender, why wouldn't they just accept that deal? And my assumption on that is that probably was not based in any facts. They were probably floating that story out to the media, hoping that the generals would overthrow Maduro, concerned that there'd be a lack of loyalty there, something like that. We have been trying to, through various diplomatic pressures and sanctions and other means, to cripple this regime, and we've failed consistently. There's a lot of loyalty for Maduro within the government, like it or not. It's very similar to Iran.
Literally all cartels.
And actually strikes, let me just finish, strikes on these random boats leaving Venezuela, that's not going to decrease support for Maduro. It's actually going to embolden people who do support him. It'll make him look like this martyr type figure, and oh my God, I'm the only one defending you from these imperialist gringos. We're making Maduro stronger because the president is a fucking idiot. And the fact that you guys haven't figured that out yet is kind of scary.
First off, your whole first part there was I know Trump's true intent, you're in the room with him, whereas in reality, the things you gave is mutual.
It's classified.
It's mutual different things. They all could be true at once. Yes, he could be wanting to stop drugs. Yes, he could also be wanting the regime change that Republicans and Democrats have been working toward for 20 years on the same team. Obama, Trump, George Bush fucking kidnapped Chavez. Well, that's what
true.
They say. So yeah, this has been U.S. policy for decades. Of course, that could be part of it. Of course, showing it off in the media to get your poll numbers up could be part of it. It doesn't have to just be one of those things. It could be all of them, but you're saying, no, it's just this. I know Trump's mind, and it's just this one cynical thing that makes him look like an asshole.
Do you think it's about the drugs?
I think that absolutely plays into it. I think that's his motivating factor because he talks about fentanyl all the time.
Yeah, but Tyler, I haven't read about it, and you guys never denied it.
Wait. I gotta.
Crime generally is a major
factor when picking Venezuela specifically, because it didn't have to be Venezuela when it comes to fentanyl.
Well, I think that's a little bit more to it. One, there's history between the two
Venezuela.
Why Venezuela particularly? If there's so many, I think it's regime change. But why Venezuela particularly? If not, just for the social media points.
They refused to come to the table in terms of taking back their migrants earlier, earlier in the Trump second term.
Wait, but that's the point.
You're explicitly saying that it's a lot more than the drug. I think the drugs is maybe Dylan, maximum, if anything. It's such a minuscule factor in the grander scheme here when it comes to why they're going after
Trump's big on crime. Crime is one of his main things he keeps harping on.
Well,
I think
that's
that's
what he
a big
says.
factor.
That's not our crime.
That's what he says.
It's
one thing to say that and then pardon presidents who smuggle drug into the United States, specifically cocaine, the drug that is being smuggled through Venezuela.
That's empirical versus anecdote. He also pardoned the January 6ers. That doesn't mean his policy isn't focused on cutting down on national crime.
What I'm saying is, I could see him.
This is not national crime.
He's been tough on drugs everywhere. They literally
I just don't see that being the main motivator for going after Venezuela
seizures
specifically.
in Texas.
But he hasn't. So the point is that the reason why Trump is harsh on Venezuela and not Mexico is because he likes Claudia Sheinbaum and doesn't like Nicolas Maduro. That's it.
Because they're not working with.
Literally it.
Well,
this is
but that's what I'm saying.
Mexico's
at least attempting to work with us.
Yeah, Mexico's working with them. Venezuela's not. Like that's as simple as that.
I didn't say they were succeeding.
Why would Venezuela have to work with us on their turf to solve our drug demand?
Because the drugs are being brought in from a Venezuelan-hosted gang that is working with the government.
By the way, I'm sorry, Tyler. Can you explain
what
to me
happens
how,
in Venezuela is Venezuela's
Trump,
problem? What happens in the U.S. is to bomb a boat outside of in Venezuela and say that that's addressing our domestic drug problem is absurd. Like the degrees of speculation required to have that make sense is crazy.
It's not. It's deterrent.
Tyler, I need to know.
It's deterrent from somebody getting on a boat. Maybe.
Why is it anecdotal for him to pardon a world leader that has been convicted of drug smuggling into the United States? Why is that anecdotal?
Do you know the story behind that?
It's anecdotal because, well,
you can look it up. If you look up right now on Google, Trump drug smuggling pardon, you will see that he pardoned a South American leader in the last 48 hours.
The guy that was convicted in New York of drug smuggling was a president of his country
by those Caribbean pirates that we were blowing up.
Right.
Yeah. I agree. Even if, let's assume he's guilty. I understand what Grid's about to say here in a second, but let's assume he's guilty. It's anecdotal because it's one person versus what his actual policy is across the board on drugs. That's the empirical. You're like he's absolutely been against crime. He's been cracking down on crime with illegal immigration, going after particularly the illegal people first. I mean, people that weren't in the country illegally, they have valid deportation orders. What, 2.3 million? I think he said at the beginning of his term.
Well, I don't argue that there's specific subsects of crime that he's particularly hard on. My point is I just don't think this is a principled stand on this issue. And if you were to make that stand, you wouldn't make it in Venezuela.
I mean, it might be emotional. Probably more emotional.
Hold on. When we are literally having record drug seizures of drugs coming across the border from Mexico, and we still have a problem with Venezuela blowing boats out of the water, all of a sudden starts making sense. Also, it is a very consistent view. As Tyler just said, Trump has very consistently been tough on crime. He wants to be seen as tough on crime. He is doing things that nobody else has bothered to do. Even when people say, yeah, why bother doing it? He's doing it. And he's been very consistent. It's you guys keep trying to say, well, I don't understand why Trump is doing this. Well, just look at the totality of it. Look at the totality.
Well, look, I'm not a geopolitical expert on South America, but Venezuela and Mexico are two different countries. And if the majority of the drugs are coming across the border in Mexico, then wouldn't the strategy be to do something in Mexico, not Venezuela? I mean, it's like, and before the election, when I was seeing these reports from Trump advisors talking about how to make military interventions in Latin America, the majority of those reports had to do with Mexico for that reason. Very few of them had to do with Venezuela, if any.
Most of the politicians that Trinidad has killed and replaced with loyalists have been in Mexico. Absolutely, and Mexico's working with it.
Well, hold on. I do want to examine this a little bit, though, right? I guess to Grid and other people saying that Mexico. Well, Mexico is about to violate a water treaty with the United States in addition to all the drugs.
I'd read about that. I'm not up on it, but I'd read about it.
Yeah, I mean, but they haven't, but they're about to, right? Because there's a drought everywhere. So, that's a big deal coming up now, at least in my local region, right? And to me, it would make way more sense to be like, oh, let's go to war over a natural resource that they're not following up on a treaty. And, if we're actually talking about the drug problem, Mexico first. But to me, it's got to be what Tyler is kind of proposing, where you're taking out this block in their global chain for this to make sense. Where it's the natural resources, the oil. That's really the only way this makes sense, with the drug stuff being maybe a scapegoat. Do you not see that? How do you disagree with that, Grid?
I'm sorry. I was looking at something like that.
How do you justify if everything of what you're saying is true, not going for Mexico, and Mexico's about to break a treaty, and all the
Mexico is currently working with us. They're currently working with the United States. They're providing us with information. I just saw a video the other day of them blowing up tunnels where the people are coming crossing the border through these tunnels. They blew it. It's really impressive with the way the ground sank down. It was awesome. So I think can we just all, I think we can all agree that Trump is willing to play, as long as you're playing ball with him, he's perfectly willing to play ball with you. But the minute that Mexico says, yeah, fuck you, or they violate the water treaty, or they give us bad information on purpose, and Trump's going to be like, all right, that's it, deal's over. Fuck you guys. Now we're going to send troops across the border, which he's promised to do before, and he literally had troops at the border ready to go across. So, he's very consistent. I mean, you don't have to agree with it, but he's very consistent in what he's doing.
Why wouldn't we go after Colombia if it was the drugs then? Why wouldn't we make
China,
Colombia, Peru to be like the ones if it's not this globalist, like a global regime kind of like fight against these Axis powers over here? Like if it's not that, why wouldn't you?
Well, that honestly wasn't on my study sheet tonight, was whether or not to go into Colombia. I don't know what we're doing in Colombia right now as far as DEA enforcement or anything like that. But the assignment was Venezuela and blowing boats out of the water. So that's what I studied for.
We're working with Colombia.
When the fent problem got bad is when we handed Afghanistan back over to the Taliban, and they shut down poppy production. Our drug problem is a direct product of the war on drugs.
That's true. Yeah. True.
I don't know, man. I do a lot of heroin when I was younger. Fentanyl has been around for a lot longer. It was back like when the U.S.
Prevalent. It wasn't prevalent because you could get your heroin.
No. I was getting heroin at like 16. I'm 37. That was like 21 years ago.
Fentanyl was not prevalent. Heroin was.
Yeah, that's when it started. When I came back to New York to visit, maybe like 10 years ago, we got a bundle, and I sniffed a shack. You could tell immediately that there was shit was cut. It is not good. That's 12 years ago.
And if heroin addicts could just buy their heroin, they wouldn't be surprised by having it cut up with all sorts of weird shit that they didn't expect. Like I said, almost all of the drug problems, almost all the organized crime problems, all this shit is directly a product of prohibition.
A lot of talk in the last election about the affordability of housing, not a lot about the affordability of heroin.
Right? No, I mean,
I said this the last time we did the Mexico debate. There's always the debate. There's always the argument about making like drug treatment more available to people, and helping drug addicts and doing things domestically to reduce the need.
Seems like it's pretty available to people.
I don't know. Maybe that would help a little bit. Instead of bombing random fucking speedboats, like leaving Venezuela. I don't know. Just a thought.
I mean, for Grid and Tyler too, like I think that the problem with the argument that Trump cares about drugs and how it's affected, after this pardon of the Ecuadorian guy, I don't know if you guys remember, Trump also pardoned like 5 other massive drug traffickers. I mean, I know the libertarians like him, but Ross Ulbricht was the founder of the Silk Road, who basically was able to run drugs and firearms across the globe, and he pardoned him.
Ross
clearly doesn't.
Ross Ulbricht actually never did any of that. He simply provided a mechanism for it, and he was
right.
Same with Mark Zuckerberg. I bet Mark Zuckerberg in that sense has facilitated more drug sales than anybody else ever.
Yeah, let's go.
That was like on the day. No, that's not the same argument.
Dusty and I had this. We had a debate on this. We were a team on the Ross.
I hate this argument though from you, Castle, just because Biden gave clemency to a bunch of people that had drug sentences. Does that mean he's doesn't care about drug laws, doesn't care about people?
No American president cares about the drug crisis, guys. They don't give a shit.
Wait. I never argued Biden cared about it.
We invaded Panama. We invaded fucking Panama because Noriega is a drug lord, even though we knew he was a drug lord before that. And then Panama became a home base for the Cali cartel.
I don't have a preference.
Fuck about drugs, guys. If they did, they would do something about it domestically.
Obama, Trump, Biden, and then Trump again. I can give you examples, not right now because I'd have to look them up. all of them passing policy to help people in the United States that are on drugs in their own different ways.
Dude, I mean, listen, I know you have a history. So do I. I work in drug treatment. Like, you know, people are seeing their benefits being cut and shit like that. Like, it's harder than ever. It's harder than ever before, I would say, to get clean now. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the federal government, state governments also, they don't take it seriously. In fact, a lot of them have shifted over the treatment model to like not even preaching abstinence anymore. There's legal weed everywhere. It's like, I don't know. But yeah, I mean,
the
like,
hospitals out here will hand out not just clean needles, but clean meth pipes. That's crazy.
Yeah, which is fucking, I mean, I get the harm reduction thing. It does make sense from like a public health standpoint.
The needles make sense. Needles make sense. But handing out meth pipes does not make any sense at all.
That just sounds like it's for a good time maybe, but.
Right, it's a party pack.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, dude, Iran-Contra and the crack epidemic, I mean, this is like standard stuff. Like, we've promoted drug use in America consistently. I don't know if it was always deliberate, really. You know, I don't know if I go that deep into it, but it's clear, like, a lot of our international policy and our interventions, especially in Central and Latin America, have proliferated drug use, and the government is totally fine with that. They consider it, you know, a necessary evil.
A little bit. Let me rephrase a little. Let me go to Grid and Tyler here on this one. Here, so okay, y'all seem to be the most hawkish on this. What like level of action would you be okay with by Trump and the Trump administration against Venezuela? Are you talking full-on invasion, regime change, like?
And I don't think
congressional approval or no.
I mean, both, either or. You can explain. Yeah, let's hear. What do you think?
I'll go first so Tyler can organize his thoughts, because I'm very cut and dried on this. And I've thought about this because it's been a subject that we've been talking about quite a bit lately. While I'm, look, if we blow speedboats out of water with narco guys running drugs and shit, fine, whatever. But we have a horrible track record when it comes to replacing governments. And all it ends up doing is causing us more trouble. I would much rather us just try and basically contain Venezuela enough until it just fails on its own, and take away their revenue streams as much as we possibly, as far as drugs go, and getting help from the U.S. as much as possible. And either Maduro gets taken out and somebody collects $50 million for putting his head on a pike, which at some point one of the guys close to him is going to look at that and go, "I'd like to be boss, and not only can I be boss, but I can get a $50 million payday." And Maduro's.
Why do you think it hasn't happened yet?
Yeah, why do you think they wouldn't just kill the guy who brought the head and keep the 50?
Right,
it needs to be 51 million. Looking for 51.
Yeah. But I just don't think that we should be installing governments anymore. I think we've proven we have a horrible track record at it. We don't need to do that anymore. I'm a non-interventionist for the most part. Look, if boats come towards us, fine, take care of that. But we don't need to go into somebody else's country looking to fix their fucking problems. I would much rather let them just fail on their own.
These people are guilty of being on a boat. You are as guilty as they are. You have a boat, right?
I do have a boat.
That's what they're guilty of, is having a boat.
No, they're not. That's not what they're guilty of.
What about you? How far would you want them to go?
I don't want any laws to be broken, but congressional approval.
That's a hell of a clarifying statement.
If congressional approval was given, I think I would be on board with as far as an Afghanistan-like takeover of Venezuela. Leaving Afghanistan was a mistake.
Tyler, you cut out on my end for just a second. What did you say?
An Afghanistan-like takeover of Venezuela, where we're there for about 60 years.
That's what I thought you said.
Does that include the 20 years and $2 trillion?
Has so much better connotations, but you had to say Afghanistan.
Japan, I know. And South Korea, Germany. I think leaving Afghanistan was a mistake.
Tyler, I had such high hopes for you.
That's where I side with the neocons, man. Nation building is a pretty good thing. Why not make everywhere like America? Then we can go on vacation places again.
Inside every Venezuelan is an American waiting to come out.
Venezuela looks like they need some democracy.
Inside them also is some dogs, so maybe that'll convince them.
So, look, I do want to throw a few things out there.
Man.
What percentage, and I know we're going back to drugs for a second here, what percentage of drugs coming into the United States is coming from Venezuela, right? Because if we were making a decision to make this intervention based upon drugs, then doing this and investing all the manpower, investing all the money, we have 15,000 soldiers. We got 14 big ships, including the largest aircraft carrier, the Ford, in the entire U.S. arsenal, just floating off the coastline. Yes, that is a pressure cooker. Yes, that makes people around Maduro think of options. Yes, it makes Maduro have to keep everything on high alert, and it puts him in a difficult position. But it also costs a lot of money. And if after 2 years, all we did was...
those guys are getting paid anyway.
Well, I mean, it costs money for the fuel to
it doesn't matter where that
it
doesn't matter where that aircraft carrier is parked.
It costs
we're paying
money
for
to, bomb things.
Yeah, you don't think it costs more to station it out there than it does to park it?
It's not just a question about the cost of the personnel. It's also a question of the cost of the entire operation itself. And depending upon how long this runs, the price tag on that will go
I have a
more into the
non-smart-ass answer for this.
Billions of dollars. And so when I think about the money invested, the time invested, the international reputational damage we're doing to ourselves, it just doesn't make sense based off of drug enforcement for us to be doing what we're doing right now. Now, based upon America's
I have a
national
non-smart-ass
security
answer.
Based upon something that's different from that is asking what would be best for America in this situation. If Maduro was to go, that's 740,000 billion barrels of oil, 740,000 barrels of oil that is more available towards a Western ilk than necessarily China. That is a country that does have rare earth that is controlled by gangs we might be willing to do business with in order to get access to those rare earth. Does that mean we should do business with those gangs? Not necessarily, but what's in our nation's best interests? Maybe it is in our nation's best interest. And so whether or not we should intervene based upon that, answer. I could see Marco Rubio. I could see the people in immediately Trump's orbit just thinking, look, invading, putting troops on the ground, that's too costly. Standing back, adding on the pressure year after year, just seeing what happens while trying to avoid too big of a political risk, a bombing here, a bombing there, waiting for something to happen. That seems much more up Trump's alley as a historical fence sitter.
Okay, so I have a non-smart-ass answer. First is I actually would rather the Gerald R. Ford be off the coast of the Americas, south and north, than parked off the coast of Afghanistan and near Russia and all of that right now, because I'm tired of fighting wars in the fucking desert. So yes, park that shit right the fuck off of the coast of Venezuela. I'm perfectly fine with that. It costs the same. And it's an easier flight home for our boys when they need to take liberty. So so that part of it I don't care about. I don't see that as a drain on our resources. We're gonna pay, those guys get paid no matter what, and we're not. I don't think it's costing us anything. As far as the munitions, we can even write that down as. I mean, we fly those flights, we send those bombs. Every single day. The United States military blows shit up. I just don't see this as we're not fighting a war. We're not fighting a war. We're just occasionally smoking a camel. I mean, not a camel, but a cigarette boat, and it's fine. And I kind of when it got a little bit smart ass there at the end, but seriously, I don't see that we're spending a ton of resources to do this. But you're right, we are getting a lot of mileage out of it. There's a lot of pressure on Maduro. There's a lot of pressure on the layers of the onion that Tyler spoke about. That is his inner circle and he literally the entire government basically of Venezuela is cartel or otherwise involved in illicit activities. Venezuela is such a shithole that they literally have actual slavery, not just sex slavery. I mean actual slavery. And for anyone to be like why we shouldn't just carpet bomb them into oblivion, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't vote against it.
We're talking to each other on devices made by slave labor in China. Your outrage is situational.
Wow.
Now they get.
I don't follow your logic.
They don't have people with automatic weapons standing over them saying.
You
completely contradicted yourself.
You opposed the intervention, and then you just said you're okay with carpet bombing. So which is it? I could understand it.
can understand.
Okay,
He likes a little seasoning.
I mean, I don't agree with it, but I'm okay with them parking the boat off the shore.
Are you familiar with gunboat diplomacy?
Yes.
Yeah, so you do understand that it's not about just parking the boat there just to like occasionally shoot around. Like there's a bigger like objective to all of this.
Yeah.
Like there's a bigger goal here, and it's unrelated, or at least only I would say
if it's a side effect, if it is in fact a side effect of the gunboat diplomacy that Maduro caves or his lieutenants take his ass out, or there is some change that benefits us, great. If there isn't, we tried.
Okay, so I want to answer Dylan's question
Tyler,
as well. I got Dylan asked a question about the cost benefit analysis of doing this. The reason why we're doing it, like, what is the downside right now for anybody in any of these countries to the south of us that has a politician that takes cartel money? The government's not going to do much to them because they're fucking scared shitless of the cartel who kill politicians and police like 10 times the rate of what happens in like other countries, maybe higher than that. I think they reached like 50, 100 a year at one point. Like they're just politicians dropping left. What's to stop these people from taking the money? What deterring factor is there? Should we just ignore it and allow it to happen and just try to catch it on the border?
Dude, we just pardoned a guy who took money from the cartels.
Yeah, again, I already addressed that anecdote. I'm talking about the overall empirical strategy.
Well, no, I mean, to your point, like to your question, like there's no incentive because there's no consistent threat from the United States for taking money from the cartels. I mean, dude, being a Latin American country is basically based on historical precedent. There's like a reason to be afraid of the United States at all times.
We aren't
right?
talking about any
other
details
than
to that. He could have been a friend of the cartels that's willing to now work with the Trump administration and give them something
to help Prospera. I understand that.
So that's a deal. That's somebody working with Trump. Wow, like how would you handle this?
It's a deal with a lot of things baked into it. Do you think that a guy who was connected to the cartels is going to go back down to Honduras and say, by the way, guys, I can't do that anymore. I got to help Prospera out. Peter Thiel really needs me. You know, like he's going to go right back into the same networks that he was connected to before because that's what his power is predicated on. And that's pretty much all over Latin America. A lot of those states are narco states.
We gain something out of it because he's willing to work with us. The point of Venezuela,
but he could still be working with the cartels. Hold on, so it's not stopping the cartels because your initial assertion.
I'm making a point to what Dylan was talking about, the cost benefit analysis of Venezuela, not that Trump's inconsistent, which he somewhat is. I'll give you that. Anyways, it's about establishing deterrence. And there's a bunch of people that take cartel money in all these countries. We're going into the one that the United States has been trying to get out of office for fucking 20 years, him and his predecessor. The one that everybody on the left and the right in politics agrees is stealing elections, oppressing his people, etc. This is like to show anybody that if you take cartel money, we are not fucking around. This is the same deterrence that Israel established in the Middle East.
But Tyler, that's the part that it falls apart at the end there because that precedent can't be established unless it's established in places other than just Venezuela. Otherwise, the only precedent you're setting is that if you're Venezuela and we don't like your regime, we'll take you out. But if everybody else is dealing with the cartel, it's fine.
It's not because they're Venezuela. It's already been established that Venezuela is refusing to cooperate in any way. They wouldn't take back their criminal.
Tyler, this isn't happening in Venezuela. They're taking longer, though.
Let me just jump in here. Because I think that we can explore this a little further. I'm going to posit a position that I don't think anybody's represented, but I think should be represented because there's a group of people saying it. I'm one of the people saying it. I say we should just go invade this country, right, and just take it over. Let's actually do the regime change. Let's just go all out. Like Grid and Tyler haven't full on said it. I'm like, let's go in there. You know, I think it is. I'm not buying it's for drugs. It's bullshit. It's definitely for the natural resources and the oil and the petrodollar and fuck Russia and fuck this global life. That's why we're doing it. That's what we should be doing. I feel like we should just be honest and say that it's whoop ass time, and that's why we're going in there. That's what we should do. And like I think nobody here said that, so I'm going to say it now. Like I think that we would be knocking one more little piece of the pie off that's in this little nasty alliance they have
And that helps our American imperial intentions. And I think it would help places like Ukraine. I think it would help like places like Israel because we're knocking all these things down and we're helping our allies. Why are y'all so hesitant whenever it comes to this?
Dude, it's logistically fraught for a lot of reasons. For one thing, Venezuela is very mountainous, so it's not a matter of like you just send the military and their ground troops and it's just you set up a foothold and well that's it and we won, yay. Like there's issues with supplying your troops. Venezuela has combined military strength like conventional and paramilitary force of like 100,000 people. You know, there's renegade groups and factions that will vie for power after the government falls. You know, I already talked about this at the start of the panel. Then it becomes much more like Dylan was talking about the sunk cost already. Can you imagine the cost of trying to hold shit together in Venezuela after Maduro falls?
It becomes Puerto Rico the second.
You ready for the solution? We figured it out. They did a good job. Rwanda, we hired them just like the French did. Rwanda cleaned up all their contracts. They know how to deal with militias. They know how to deal with the people in the mountains. Problem solved.
We already have somebody, Gibbs froze.
We lost Gibbs, but
we already have somebody.
He lost his connection.
The cartel got him. They already have somebody they want to put in place as the replacement president.
Dude, Tyler would get his wish, another Afghanistan, if we fucking send troops into Venezuela. It'd be another 20-year struggle with nothing to gain from it.
Nothing to gain. Women getting education.
And it would probably
living in unoppressed lives. Why do you hate women? Why do you hate women? And they were allowed to go to school. You know, I'm all for it.
PMCs. Do you not like? What you don't agree that we can use PMCs like Rwanda to clean out the narco terrorists?
I think it's a lot more complicated than you realize, and I think that's why they haven't. It's the same with Iran that I've always said to you. That's why they don't send the military in. If it was easy, they would just do it. They did it in a bunch of other countries.
Yeah, but we don't hold anything. The problem is now look, I could get on board. That's the problem Gibbs, right there. Grant. I could get on board with what Gibbs says. If we sent the 160th SOAR down there, we sent 5th Group, we sent a bunch of, we sent some guys down there that do serious shit and fuck shit up and took over the country, and we fucking kept it, and it became Puerto Rico the second. No problem.
But we don't do that.
U.S. territory. You can't be a citizen. But we rule everything and we tax your ass.
Okay, can I just make a point and not to get into
Ukraine? If we did
Ukraine,
that, I could get on board.
I've had a million debates about Ukraine, a number with Dylan. Let me just if we purport to care about sovereignty, we can't just do things like that.
That's the problem.
We can't.
I don't think that. I mean, okay, I actually agree with you 100%. If we purport to care about sovereignty, I think that
hold on.
is the biggest lie of the last 20th century. Like we see,
you're sovereign until somebody conquers you, and then we're sovereign.
I mean, I just think it's a lie, and I think Russia is
king is dead. Long live the king.
That's a lie. Yeah, they've gone in there and invaded Ukraine. They came up with bullshit, did it, and I think they, showed that the emperor has no clothes.
Okay, wait, Gibbs, that doesn't mean sovereignty is a lie. That just means sovereignty, like law and order, is something that has to be maintained. If you don't maintain it, if you don't have a power base, then you don't have it. Venezuela doesn't have it because they're shit at managing their economy. There's been a successful sanctions campaign, successful pressure campaign, and so therefore right now the amount of sovereignty that they'd like to have is a lot less than what they actually have. But that doesn't mean it's dead, Gibbs. It just means you need to maintain it.
Well, it needs to be rebuilt.
There's also something to get under the idea. I know nobody wants to say this, but Russia's whole argument about invading Ukraine and their right to a big part of it, and it's a propaganda narrative, but nevertheless is, well, the U.S. doesn't respect other people's sovereignty. Look at Iraq, look at Syria, look at Libya, blah, blah, blah. We can't set that precedent and then expect other great powers not to do the same thing. And we can't set that precedent and not expect other countries to look at America and say, wow, fuck that, I'd rather do business with China, which is pretty much what happened in much of Africa. They can establish developmental relationships with China that, yes, are exploitative, but they don't involve violent coercion or the threat of violent force.
We won't work with those countries and
in China. We won't work with Mali. We won't work with Ghana. We won't work with those countries because they literally are nothing but human rights violations. It's an entire
Mali,
country.
and say how all the coup governments post-coup, I agree. It's because the coup governments are aligned with Russia. But you can't tell me all of the places that China is developing economically in Africa we wouldn't want a stake in. In fact, I'm pretty sure the IMF floated loans to those places.
Well, the IMF does that to control the currency of the world, but that's irrelevant. That's a dumb point to make. But
it's not a dumb point. The IMF is an extension of like American world hegemony. Everybody knows
that's how we control the
right. So, but my point is, you would have a stronger American hegemony if that's really what you guys want. If we respect other countries' sovereignty.
What I want is irrelevant because as a country, as a nation, we conquered the world and then we gave it all back. So obviously, as a country, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. What do you mean?
We conquered the world for what, like 10 years?
We conquered the world and then we gave it all back. We gave
How did we conquer the world?
To Japan.
Dude, we conquered the world from like 1991 until 2001. RIP, the American Empire, 10 years.
Well, also when we give stuff back, it's not just because we want to give it back. I mean, like making Japan a state would probably be a very difficult process that would come with a lot of resistance. Same thing with the Philippines. Same thing with, a lot of territory. It's part of the reason why many Republicans are uncomfortable with the idea of turning Puerto Rico into a state, even though it has an identifiable landmass, a population. So it's people say, oh, we gave it up like it was a gift, but I mean, after a lot of times we used the Philippines for military purposes.
We don't really give it back. We say, here, now you manage this the way that we want you to. It's just sort of a...
There's a few things I wanted to get into. I wanted to game this out a little bit, Gibbs, if you'd let me. Like an actual scenario, because, I actually have some agreement with Non-Smoker here on the idea that if a nation is sovereign, it must be sovereign. Therefore, the United States cannot just say, we don't like Maduro, therefore, goodbye Maduro. That's why I said, is it within America's interest for Maduro to go? Yes. That doesn't necessarily mean that I support going in and removing Maduro, just thought it'd be clearly within our interests if we had access to 740,000 more barrels a day and the largest oil reserves on the planet. It'd be within any country's interest to have access to those oil reserves, especially in an energy pinch. Number one, I don't think it would be like Afghanistan if we were to militarily intervene in Venezuela like Gibbs and Tyler are suggesting. That doesn't mean that it would be fun or it would be good. It's just that this is the one memory and war memory most Americans have. It's that in Iraq. And I don't think
what do you think would be different about
it? Compared to those countries, because number one, like the sects that led to a lot of the interfighting that left America kind of in the dust. Venezuela doesn't exist in that way. There's no Sunni, there's no Shia divide, these type of like religious and intertribal. Those things don't exist. Basically. There are conflicts in Venezuela, conflicts between different gangs, conflicts between different like people who are power brokers who want to take over power, but it doesn't have a lot of the same religious connotations or like cross-border terrorist organizations that would be crossing borders. There'll be gangs, but it's I don't think it will necessarily look like that war. I do think that the biggest danger is we have a Libya-style situation where we go in, we decapitate the leadership, we say, yippee, whoever comes in next better not smuggle drugs into the United States, we leave, and then different gangs and power brokers fight over territory and land, where the opposition would maybe take like a third of the country, the military would like take the capital, and then you just have a ton of violence and chaos where you're never really able to get the train back on the track. That's the thing that concerns me. So if we took it upon our own moral responsibility to go in there and say, we're going to remove the government of Nicolas Maduro because it serves our interests, we might actually leave the Venezuelan people in a worse place. I don't think Venezuela improves until Maduro goes, but how he leaves, if we go in there and steal their revolution from them, that might end up derailing the train from the track in a way that's going to get a lot of people
now
killed.
You're just inviting the CIA to go in and do what the CIA does. Are you in Ukraine currently, or are you back in the States?
I just got back from Ukraine a few weeks ago.
Okay. I was just curious. I didn't know what time zone you were on.
I think the only scenario where the United States should maybe intervene is a scenario where the government has decided that a large-scale military crackdown in reaction to a large protest, killing thousands of people, certain select strikes to stop teams headed out to kill protesters. I could imagine a scenario like that, But the idea that
I don't
we
even
need to
think
be the
it-
ones to go in there and create something.
The one thing,
we need to create
Dylan, if they
an
were going to
overthrow.
do
I
that,
don't agree with
they
that.
could have. Well, see, Dylan, if they were going to do that, this is why I'm much more in the like camp of like, yeah, it's just it's obviously not for drugs, in my opinion. It's obviously take down the alliance, like kind of thing in my mind. It's in our best interest. Like I fully am on board with that, right? If we were going to do that, he had already hired Cuban death squads to kill civilians. Like we have evidence of that. Like we know that already happened. Like if we were going to invade, I don't know why we didn't invade then. You know, if that was going to be our reasoning. I don't know. Like I feel like now it's just more.
Well, then my argument would have been if there was a time to intervene, it would have been when they opened fire, not months after the fact. Once there's a whole other different conglomeration of reasons that are motivating us.
They stole 2 elections.
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah. Let me, because so that's a great point. That you guys have made. The interesting thing about that is when we put the bounty in place and all of that. Currently, I don't believe as an American you can enter Venezuela. Like if you go there and they find you, well, first of all, they're not going to let you in the country. If you somehow manage to get in the country, like you cross a border somewhere, you come in through, some way, they're likely to kill you. So really the only assets that we have left in the country are basically CIA and NSA and DIA and, alphabet soup guys. That's it. We don't have anybody. We don't have anyone else in the country right now because they will literally kill you as an American if you're there. So that, I think, kind of plays to your point that you're right. Absolutely. That we could and we should probably just sit back, and we may have missed the opportunity, and just let the cards fall where they may and put the pressure on them and let them fold and then pick up the pieces with I think what you're kind of referencing is the idea of surgical strikes and then put some people in play, maybe even hire some of our own Cuban death squads to go over there. But it's an interesting dynamic. I think it's really fluid in Venezuela, and they're all psychopaths that are running around running that country right now. They're not like, it's not like dealing with like normal politicians. So I think that we sometimes forget that.
I want to talk about the sovereignty point both you guys brought up.
Yeah, we're going to talk with you. Go ahead.
All right, so the sovereignty point you guys brought up, bro. Yes, nations should have sovereignty, but sovereignty also comes with a set of rules and policies that you need to follow. And if you're rigging elections, killing your own people, jailing your political adversaries for no crime, you're stealing billions of dollars worth of other companies' money at gunpoint. And then on top of that, you are violating another nation's well-being by having state-sponsored terrorists, narco-terrorists, run illegal immigrants, some of which are violent, and drugs into those countries and killing politicians in many of those countries. Then yes, like eventually you have violated national sovereignty. When you're branching out, when Tren de Agua, who is hosted in Venezuela, who is working in coordination with the Venezuelan government, is going into several other nations and killing politicians, they don't get sovereignty arguments anymore. They're violating other people's sovereignty.
We lost it during Fast and Furious. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think Fast and Furious did all that. All it did was put a bunch of guns that we were supposed to be tracking into circulation so we could see where they were going, and then we lost track of those guns.
I understand what it is, but your argument falls apart unless you're willing to use it both ways right there.
That's not a violation of sovereignty, though. That's just trying to track. That's how we get intel and things like that. The scandal was that we lost the guns.
We get intel on crime by causing crime.
We put in guns into the gun trafficking was already going on. We took tagged guns and inserted them in there so we could follow where they went. Yes, that's investigating crime. Yeah,
I understand that after you want Maduro gone, but I think that if we were to go in there and just remove him ourselves and put troops on the ground, I don't know if that support holds domestically in the United States. I'm just talking about this in practical terms. Fuck morality. In practical terms, I don't think Americans want 2 to 3 years in the Venezuelan jungle fighting gangs. They're going to be fighting about stuff that none of these soldier boys are going to have any knowledge about. They're going to have to get local translator. They're going to need to build an entire structure for something that Trump, I don't even think, is signed on to. He understands the problem with it. So then what's the other option? You do a strike, you remove the government through decapitation. Okay, but unless we're willing to put troops on the ground, then we have a Libya situation. And then besides people bringing up Libya every time they want to make fun of American interventionism, they'll just bring up Libya and Venezuela as a country that is now torn in half by gang violence and opposition leaders fighting from different capitals of support. And so I'm looking at this, and the safest bet from my position is to sit back and wait for either an inciting incident, i.e. Maduro decides, 2 apartment buildings full of, the opposition, we're just going to burn from the ground, and it starts some protest movement. And, it gets to a point where the regime is going to collapse and they have to use overwhelming violence to stop it. And at that point, we strike them once they start mowing down protests or something, some inciting incident, instead of us trying to create something, or revanchism, which the government of Venezuela has engaged in since the government of Hugo Chavez and before, when it comes to Guyana. And there have been real threats towards the state of Guyana for quite a time now, which is actually on a path to produce more barrels of oil than Venezuela, just due to the efficiency of how they're working with American oil producers, how they're managing their resources much better. And Venezuela, in response to that, but also due to its revanchism, have talked about interventionism. These are 2 potential inciting incidents where in Guyana's case, we can get the international community behind us because it would be a situation kind of like Kuwait. And in the other instance, the massacre would be so overwhelming, or this incident would be not hopefully, but if you would want this to succeed, would get such public reaction that the general Venezuelan public, who have probably already signed on to Maduro's leaving, could sign on to it. But outside of those 2 scenarios, which require more work than just the United States to get something done, I don't think everything else is a sure bet. I think it's actually a really risky endeavor.
They have 20 jets.
Let's go.
Come on. I'm sorry, go Castle. Yeah, go Castle. Sorry.
I was just going to bring up, because a lot of these scenarios involve either a strike or hoping that the Maduro regime falls in some way. But I think, Tyler mentioned it and Grid mentioned it in some way. They're not going to let Americans in. And also they just had recent elections where Venezuelans voted for the opposition, and they were obviously rigged against the opposition. So in that case, why not just have the international community, the IFES, that basically is for supporting rights to participate in free and fair elections, go in and make a deal with Maduro, say, if you conduct a fair election, we'll back away from, bombing the ships in the ocean or whatever. We don't have to strike anybody. We don't have to do anything militarily. And then they can have a free and fair election where the people can decide. I think that's a fair diplomatic way that maybe Rubio is talking about.
I'm the moderator, and I'm not supposed to answer this, but I'm going to answer it. It's because they're a bunch of bitches. That's why. That's why.
Who enforces that on the ground, though? Is that going to be UN peacekeepers? Is that going to be some coalition of countries?
It'd have to be the UN. It'd have to be they wouldn't let the US do it, right? We wouldn't have to be involved. I was just saying it would have to be that would be the only way to an international organization like that.
The Blue Helmets could deal with Venezuela's gangs?
Wait, why would gangs have to do with the election though?
Well, just because
that's who controls the elections.
Like a free and fair election could take place.
Wait, but that's not nobody to control that wouldn't be the deal.
If the government's broken down, you need somebody on the ground to stop the breakdown. Right. Bad parties take advantage.
I'm saying before,
100%.
No, but Grid, you're acting like that it's going to be overrun during the election. I'm saying you have to have an election, and then if there's a fallout. Okay, if there's a fallout, then obviously you're going to have people there, but that's not going to be part of the deal.
Castle, let me just walk you through your logic. All right, I just tell me where I'm wrong in this logic train that I'm about to give you. Okay, you tell me. Stop. All right, IMF or whatever, they come in, they make these rules. They're going to make it a free and fair election. Cool, we're coming. And then they decide they're going to bring in the UN peacekeepers. That's who's going to back them up against the cartel of the sun and the Venezuelan government when they decide, go fuck yourself, we can't buy them off. And what's going to happen? The UN is going to put their little hats on, and they're going to put their head between their legs, and they're going to roll over and say, fuck me, daddy, like they do every single time, and push comes to shove. Is that not exactly what's going to happen? We're going to be at square one, like that we were right beforehand, except maybe now we've had an international incident?
I mean, if Venezuela wants to start killing people from other countries and start an international war, good luck. Then they're basically screwing themselves even worse. if they want to do that.
Or even a step before that, they could just do like Iran did and say, nope, you can't get in here. Like, oh yeah, we're here to make.
Okay, but then the deal's off. I mean, I'm saying if they don't want to do that, then the deal's off. But I'm just saying that's the opportunity that they have if they don't want to get bombed or if they don't want to be invaded militarily. I'm not saying that it's the best.
So then they just bought like time indefinitely by like doing this.
Yeah, they're buying time. They're buying time, but I think that's beneficial if for Maduro if he wants to buy more time. But I think that staves off any military intervention.
I got a jet.
Did you?
I just got a jet real quick. I got a jet real quick. I'm not going to tell you the reason. Well, I was chalk it up to I'm scared that non-smoker is going to crush my argument, and I'm running from him. Let's go with that.
That's right. That's right. Another foe vanquished.
I wonder what he's doing.
I do want to bring up one thing I'd be remiss. I feel like it's pertinent based off recent news. Do we think there's any concern with the Pete Hegseth and the Survivors scandal here? Is this going to be?
Tyler left just as you brought that up, huh?
Yeah, coincidence. Let's see. He must have known somehow. What are our thoughts here? Castle, why don't you start us off with that? You think it's going to be a spicy story?
Well, I think it is a spicy story, but if history has shown us anything, I mean, with the whole incident with Hegseth before this, Signalgate, I think it was called, I really don't see him being let go in this situation by the Trump administration. So I think Congress will make a fuss about it. They'll try to make it a big thing, but at the end of the day, I don't think it really changes anything.
Process is the punishment.
Is it a war crime? Is it a war crime?
Based on what I've been reading, and I know there's a lot of classified information out there that hasn't been released, it seems like it would be a war crime based on the second strike.
No, yeah, we'll just go to circle. Dylan, what do you think?
Whether it's a war crime or what I think of Pete Hegseth.
Like this, what do you think?
Would I go get a beer with him?
This specific situation with the kill the survivors thing.
There's a bunch of things you would have to assume in order for this strike to be legal. Number one, you'd have to assume that the president is, by ordering these strikes as commander-in-chief, he's acting within his legal authority to do so in the first place, both by using the authorization for use of military force, designating these group terrorist organizations, even though they're largely engaging in the financial transaction of drugs for profit. In order to say that that's legal. That's the first thing, that even engaging in any bombing by using that pathway is legal, and that the president of the United States doesn't have to ask Congress. Then you have to assume that the way that the strike was conducted is legal. And what we know right now is that there was two strikes. There was an initial strike that killed, I believe it was 9 people, and then another strike which killed the remaining 2. We have not seen the footage. Footage does exist of this. I hope the administration posts the footage online, as they have posted footage of other strikes before, so I don't know what would restrict them from doing it. But from the senators who saw it and were a part of the briefing that happened earlier today, it seemed that there's some consensus that there's no evidence that Hegseth himself ordered to kill them all, which was the way people, one of the quotes that people were using. But it seemed that there was also one of the quotes that stuck with me from one senator was, it was one of the most concerning things I've seen in the way that the second strike was done. And so that leads me to believe that there's a good chance that the boat that they were using was disabled, that they weren't able to continue to move along with that boat, and that the strike is being based off of the legal idea that, well, those guys in the water who can no longer move around might call back to their buddies, and they might come and grab the drugs and then save the drugs. And since the drugs are a weapon against America, we have the right to blow it up. This legal logic, I don't think will hold. I think there's too many barriers in between the legal assumptions you would have to make to say that this strike was legal and legally conducted. You would have to assume, first off, that the administration has completely told the truth. You'd have to assume that it's legal for them to be doing these strikes in the first place. And you would have to assume that the use of drugs as a weapon, as an attack against America is a fine concept, and that they were still somehow a threat after their boat was disabled. There's so many barriers you have to cross to say that this is not a war crime, that it's going to be, I think the administration is going to be on the defense for it for a bit.
Dusty, what do you think?
After that, I think that he basically stated everything well. I agree with Dylan. And I think that we would need to know what the reason was for the secondary strike. But I think I agree with everything before that, right? Like, we would need to get all the way through, this is legal, this was a legal action, to then get to the question of, well, why did you strike him again?
All right, non-smoker.
Yeah, of course it's a war crime. I mean, I think the strikes themselves are probably a war crime, and I don't know, like in terms of, is there going to be a blowback or like repercussions or anything? No, I think in my view, people like this tend to act with impunity for the very fact that they know that there will be no blowback. It's like a micro shock and awe. Like, why don't we do the most visually? And in this case, obviously the footage was not released or whatever, not the public anyway, but, like it's about the viciousness of this. It's about setting an example. And I don't know, I really have no faith that anybody will be prosecuted under the due process of law for what is obviously a war crime. Yes.
All right. Well, this will be a first if it happens, but 100% consensus going around here. I have a feeling the grid's not going to agree with the rest of y'all on this. So
yeah, I don't agree at all.
What are your thoughts?
I don't agree at all.
this?
If your job is to destroy a target, you destroy a target. If it takes 2 missiles, you use 2 missiles. It's the end of story. We don't know what their ROE is. We don't understand what they we are making not even armchair quarterback calls on something that professionals do. These aren't idiots. These aren't people that just do shit for no fucking reason. These are fucking professionals that did their fucking job and they did it well. And that's the end of the story.
It's their integrity that's in question, not their competence.
Yeah. They're also not good people.
So I do not in general question the integrity of
Do you think that the U.S. has ever committed a war crime?
I'm sorry?
I
Has the U.S. ever committed a war crime in your view, though?
No.
Great.
We've only committed war crimes and wars we've lost.
Well, actually, Canadians.
Right, the only war crime is not killing enough of them.
We have the term war crimes, so I don't know that we've ever risen to that level of. But we'll figure it out. I'm sorry, you were going to ask.
Other countries commit war crimes? Can other countries commit war crimes?
I don't know. Have they?
I'm asking you. By your standard, can they not?
By my standards?
Yeah.
I believe that an example of war crimes such as beheading unarmed men, yes, has happened.
Right. Would that constitute a war crime of a different variety or category than killing possibly just random people on the sea?
No, that's not the same thing. If you think it's the same thing, you're a complete fucking idiot.
How is it different?
I mean, you can call me names, but I mean, I just,
I'm not calling you a name. I'm saying that if you believe
I'll
that
be the idiot. What's the
literally beheading somebody with a fucking sword that is unarmed is a war crime, that and that equates somehow to
sending
is it the sword or is it the unarmed? To behead people. Is that what you're saying?
That we
as long as their head is attached.
You don't even know the ROE. You don't know if anyone was armed. You know nothing, and you're trying to make an armchair quarterback.
You know as much as I do.
Right, which is why
if they're on a sinking ship, they're probably not armed and dangerous to us.
Well,
it's safe to say that they're not dangerous.
People in Afghanistan are not armed and dangerous to me, but yet we kill them.
Yeah, I have a problem with that too, incidentally.
I'm just trying to figure out where your standard is.
Because the argument being made is that they are dangerous to you. The argument that's being made is that the drugs that are being brought into the United States is a threat to you and to me and to everyone in this room. That's a threat to American citizens. That it is a type of war, and therefore that gives us authority to strike them. But I would make the argument, and I know many people have been destroyed by drugs, but you have to make a conscious decision to purchase a drug. You have to make a conscious decision. I'm going to buy heroin. I'm going to go buy cocaine. I'm going to go do this. You might be compelled by addiction, but that's already, once you've signed in you've already punched your card at that point.
You have to go quite far out of your way to get the...
To just say unambiguously that this 100% is the same and can be treated the same legally when no previous president, including those who have actually declared the war on drugs, have ever gone this far before. I think it's getting way ahead of ourselves before we even talk about this specific incident. And from the briefing today, we know that there were 4 strikes after the initial. There was the initial strike and then the follow-up strikes after the 9 people were killed and there were 2 people remaining out there. I understand that there are people in the U.S. Army that are fantastic people. I was raised by a U.S. Marine, but after, spending a little time talking to people from across the globe, international fighters, Ukrainian fighters, people all across the world, all sorts of people can end up committing war crimes. I don't think that there is an army in the world that is invincible against the disgusting allure of committing atrocities against your fellow man for reasons of revenge, for reasons of like sadomasochistic like type of sexual desire, whatever it is. There are people like that, I think, in every army, and it is the job of the army to keep those types of people in check and try to reduce the amount of those people that are in the armed forces. So while I do trust, U.S. service members, I don't necessarily trust every single soldier once given an illegal order to say, wait a second, the U.S. Army handbook says, or, wait a second, I don't know if this order is 100% moral. If that was the case, then, things like My Lai wouldn't have happened.
Or Texas has been on the record telling soldiers to not talk about crimes they may have committed overseas too. So like this is well known that the U.S. has committed war crimes in Afghanistan before. It's not out of the question that we would do it in this situation. But also like, even if let's say somebody in the U.S. was selling drugs and you were buying them willingly, nobody would say that you're allowed to kill your drug dealer either. That would still be a crime. So I don't see how even somebody in a boat trying to deliver drugs to wherever it is would still be like a legal strike. It's just something that is overreach.
Yeah, I mean, just to Dylan's point, quick too, not to keep piling on, but like, if you create a precedent, now let me just finish. If you create a precedent where anybody shipping drugs is potentially an enemy combatant, then by that logic, you should be carrying out lots and lots and lots of more strikes, right? I mean, anybody involved in the drug trade is a potential target, because therefore they represent the same level of threat as the people you killed in the Caribbean. And well, my issue with that is that more so if they're following through that as like the policy, which was I guess one interpretation of what a war on drugs might end up looking like, I would question why they're not following through with it. And then I would say, okay, this seems to convey to me that that's not the objective here. It's not about actually stopping drug dealers or viewing drugs as a hostile threat to the lives of Americans. It's about gunboat diplomacy and trying to force regime change.
Motivation you want to it, but what we're dealing with is what the rules of engagement, what the military is acting on. So the problem, the disconnect that
this is like saying you're only going to prosecute murders from like one group of people.
A motivation to people who are following orders that thus far have not been challenged and won.
I'm talking about the people who gave the orders.
Court of law. So until they're legal orders and they can legally blow those fucking boats away. Now, if that changes, I will be the first one to say, yep, they can't do that anymore. But right now, as of right now, it's perfectly legal for those boats to get blown to hell and back.
Well, Dude, your homework assignment for tonight is to Google jingoism. Whether it's legal or not. It would be illegal. Like there are things that have been done by people in positions of power that are illegal and never go to a courtroom. That doesn't mean those things were legal.
Yes, but
it just means that they weren't prosecuted.
This has been examined and has been determined thus far to be legal. And if that changes, then we'll take care of it.
Wait, Chris, who determined it was legal?
Okay, they have actually.
No, but who? I don't know.
I apologize. I put my notes away, so I have to pull it back up. But I don't even know what I did with them. Trump was using the not the War Powers Act, but a version of that. It expired. It was 90 days, I believe, is what he had for the first segment of it. That's expired. He's extended it again with the tacit blessing of Congress, which I believe is. I guess they can do that. I don't know. There's some question about that. And then they've got the Monroe Doctrine as well. So right now, again. Right now, unless someone, simple question. Is there any legal challenge to this that is gaining traction and or winning?
Well, that's what the congressional insight is going to determine based on the footage that they release, and then also whatever reporting came out from the decision that was being made.
Months. This has been going on for months. Has there been any congressional challenge to this or other challenge on legality that has gained traction and or won? If not,
determines your opinion on the matter.
And you can whine about it all you want. You can cope and seethe and cry all you want. But it's legal, and he can do it.
Well, I do want to throw out there that the president's party does control Congress, and the president has done things that were illegal that the Congress did not want to check him on. That the courts came out and then said, actually, this is unconstitutional. Actually, you cannot do this. And so I don't think that congressional action is necessarily the dictator of what is legal or not legal.
Well, then it'll go to the Supreme Court.
Dusty, go ahead. You're on the right, like more than these other three guys. They're all like left-leaning individuals. I would think more on the right. What?
He's in his libertarian field right now, though.
Yeah.
Right now, it's stuck here. I mean, I think that the claim that they haven't there's not legal action against it means it's legal and Grid knows that it's fucking retarded. By that logic, anything that's not okay, would you say that anything that's not prosecuted is legal?
Was Haditha not a war crime in Iraq because all those people were like let off the hook?
I don't know. Was it?
I mean, I'm asking. It's a ridiculous standard.
You're trying
to by your criteria, America can never commit a war crime because of the fucking road.
But regardless of that terrible cope.
Just because we say this is our hemisphere and we can do whatever we want, it's ridiculous.
Terrible cope. I want to know, Grid. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Your opinion on it is you can't hear me. Am I low?
Yeah, you're a little low. Well, he was talking too, so.
Is your opinion, Grid, just a byproduct of what Congress does or of legal action? Do you have an opinion of your own, or do you just?
I've already said my opinion.
You know that you like the taste of boots.
Yeah, my opinion is that I don't have a problem with them blowing the boats out of the water. I just don't.
What is your favorite flavor of boot?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. What's yours? You might want to give me some references there. I don't know.
All right. Well, we're about at that time. Let's get some closing thoughts here. And shout outs to anything y'all got going on. We'll start with you, Castle. Any closing thoughts? Shout outs. What you got going on? Talk to people.
Cool. So closing thoughts. I mean, I don't know. It sounded like outside of Grid and Tyler, and there was even maybe some agreement on some of the things that Dylan or Not Smoker was saying about, whether it's really drug related or not. It sounds like we at least got closer to acknowledging the truth of the motives behind why we're doing these things. It doesn't sound like at the end we got to agreement about whether legality matters or not. But I think just to stand on principle, I think that should matter. And I think at the end of the day that whether or not we're successful in using our show of force to encourage or force change in Venezuela, there's a long road ahead that we may not be as well prepared for, and we have to accept and acknowledge that. I think Maduro is a bad actor at the end of the day, but I think that at the same time we have to be careful about how much time and resources that we spend in it, because America right now also should be focused on more than Venezuela and what they're doing. And so I think the president would be better served and better advised to focus on economic issues at home rather than trying to stop every drug runner coming into the international waters off the coast of Venezuela. So at the end of the day, I think if the president wants to, he certainly can get us involved in this and spend trillions or billions of dollars more and not focusing on us, or he can go ahead with it and see that it's going to be unpopular as an issue here at home if we get involved militarily, and it may not even work out in Venezuela. So I think just the cost benefit of this all is not worth it in my opinion.
All right.
And if you want to follow me, CastleGuard YT at Twitter and YouTube.
Yeah, check him out, everybody. Check him out, Mr. Burns.
So I think that the United States should be engaging in a policy of cooperation with nation states if we want to fight drugs, unless we want to put our troops on the ground and specifically go in there and remove their governments, whether it be Mexico, Colombia, Venezuela, And the American, not only do I not think that's a good idea, but the American public are not signed on to it. The American public do not support it. And so I think this would be doomed to fail by whatever next administration would come in, undo this operation, then have it be nothing more than another failed American project and had a big price tag on it. Because the next administration would either end it by pulling out of it and trashing it in order to get into power in the first place, or they would continue with the failed project and just make it a bigger sunk cost. So I don't think that we should be going in there and removing them with force. I don't think that strikes can guarantee an outcome. And with so many of those outcomes being lawless hellscape with gangs controlling this part of the country and gangs controlling that part of the country, that doesn't make much sense for me either. The only scenarios I can think of is if there is a unending avalanche of violence that makes it so that there's not really much of a choice for the international community to do something but act like they should in Sudan, like they should in other situations where the humanitarian catastrophe continues to spiral, or they take a revanchist stance where, due to the international pressure on Maduro and due to the economic struggles, he decides we're going to invade Guyana in order to rebring national sentiment, try to bring back support for me, something like that. Those are the only two scenarios where I could see the United States being able to intervene militarily and have both international support to help stabilize the situation afterwards, or the domestic bottom-up support in Venezuela and at home to make it so that we wouldn't have to manage the whole situation ourselves.
All right. Thank you so much. And again, go check out his new documentary. It's really good. He does good work. It was really cool seeing on the ground action. Some people just talk about things. Dylan actually knows and bees about things. That's a really cool thing. Mr. Dusty, thanks for joining us for your first time here. I'm glad you were able to come join one of my panels. I was real happy to get you here. Hope you enjoyed it. Any closing thoughts?
Thank you for having me, and I hope to come again. Pause. My name's Taylor. My channel is The Powder Dusty on YouTube. I think that the official, as far as the information that we have goes, the reason we state for meddling with boats outside of Venezuela is insufficient. Like I said at the beginning, I think we should end the war on drugs entirely. And so I think that's unjustified entirely. As far as, and I think that everybody else on the panel agrees that that's not a sufficient justification for what we're doing, which is why we spent the whole discussion looking at other reasons why we could speculate that they're doing it. I mean, it's really hard to say if those other speculative reasons are justified because we don't know what they are. But from what we do have, I just don't see how anybody could support just blowing up random ass boats and then going, well, they're drugs.
All right. Thank you so much. And where can they find you?
Powder Dusty on YouTube.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Mr. Non-Smoker.
All right. Twitch.tv/non_smoker. Catch the struggle session every 2 weeks out on WUSB Stony Brook, WUSB.FM. So I'm completely in the camp of non-interventionism once again. It's nice to know I'm not totally alone. I think the one thing that has come out of this discussion that should be clear to any impartial observer is that drugs have very little to do with this. It's clearly part of a multi-decades-long approach towards Venezuela in which we've tried to push regime change and failed. I oppose regime change. I oppose arbitrarily removing governments we don't like and expecting it to just work out. It almost never does, whether that be through military intervention directly, like invading, or targeted strikes, as was suggested before, or economic means like sanctions, which kill innocent fucking people, or gunboat diplomacy. Any of those things, I'm completely against it because it almost never works. It hurts the people there and it makes the world at large angrier at us, trust us less. It weakens America. It's bad for Americans. far worse than shipping drugs into this country. I find it absurd the notion that we would send troops into Venezuela who might go there, suffer PTSD, ironically enough, get addicted to fucking drugs, come home, and then not be sufficiently taken care of by the federal government. And there are people who will still continue to advocate for an intervention after that. The whole thing is really disgusting. I'm opposed to it 100%, and I think you should be too. May Allah awaken the people and help them to see the evil doings of Israel and the United States.
Thank you so much. And Grid, last but not least.
Yeah. We just need to sink some more boats.
Where can they find you?
That was actually the entire subject of tonight. I mean, we had to talk about a lot more things because honestly, there's just no getting around. We just need to sink more boats. We went down an entire river of hope, a lot of seething. We did agree with Dylan on a lot of the points that he made about why it was probably not worthwhile to invade or get into an Afghanistan type situation. Although he thinks it'll work, I don't want us to get into that sort of deal with any other country. I don't think we've not had a good track record with regime changes over the past 70 fucking years that we've been trying it. You can find me at An Unreasonable Man, and I just I say important things and do important things sometimes.
And you have a show tomorrow, don't you?
I do have a show tomorrow. I do.
Where can we find your boat at so that we can?
My boat?
Make sure it's taking your boat.
My boat's my driveway. My boat's my driveway.
Oh.
I know exactly.
You hear that, Trump?
Is it a cigar boat? Cigar boat by chance?
It is not a cigarette.
Doesn't matter. It's full of drugs and illegals.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're on there, it's certainly full of illegals.
Well,
I am in the boat. Wink, wink.
I'm in the in-out, raid-out. We're going to raid Hot and Streamy. She's one of the homies. Thank y'all so much. And thank y'all for all being here. I appreciate it. I look forward to hitting y'all up soon for something. Thanks so much.
Cool.
Bye, guys.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Later.
Wow. Wowza. Wowza was owza. How's everybody doing? Okay. What do we have? You know what? We kind of have to talk about the J6 pipe bomb thing, no? Can't float around that topic. Can't get around that. Where is it? Where do we have the pipe bomb? That sounds like a dangerous thing to say out loud, but I just wanted to be known that when I say where's the pipe bomb, I mean the story. I do mean a story. Did you guys see that Russia banned WhatsApp, Roblox, FaceTime, and Snapchat? And the reasons given by the Russian Federation for these bans include for violation of Russian federal laws for WhatsApp. For Roblox, it's for propaganda of LGBT extremism and pedophiles. Gotta throw that at the end there. FaceTime for scammers and terrorists. And Snapchat for terrorist recruitment, i.e., like maybe I would assume like recruitment onto Ukrainian armed forces, something along those lines. Anyway, Russia once again protects Russia. Roblox grooming kids for Antifa. You never know. You never know in this crazy, crazy world. Okay, so I don't know if you guys saw this, but there has been an announcement from investigators that should probably shock to the core many J6 conspirators. And that's not to say those who actually stormed the Capitol building and were all pardoned irregardless of if they committed violent crimes or not. I mean those who say that J6 was an inside job. They're going to bring up Ray Epps like 20 times, that it was ordered by the FBI, that plants and informants incited the entire thing as a way to build movement, to build pressure against Trump. Now, this didn't really have much ever to back it up, but one of the biggest pieces of evidence was almost like how people talk about the missing link in evolution. Well, what connects this a species of human from this species of human? And they would have an evolutionary step in between that they would not have. They would discover it, and that gap would just move around. And the way that it would be similar to that is, okay, do you have the information on this J6er? Yes, here it is. Okay, do you have the information on this one, this one, this one? Yes, we do. Here's all the court cases. Here's all the information that's now publicly available. Okay, but do we know who planted the bombs, the pipe bombs outside of the DNC and the RNC the night before the big J6 protest, which turned into a riot and an insurrection? Those bombs were removed before any of the Trump people got there. It was determined that it might have been able to wound or kill Vice President Harris, who was being inaugurated at that time as the Vice President of the United States. Well, that's kind of crazy that they would catch all these other people, that there's so many cameras, that there's so much evidence, but they can't catch this one dude, this one pipe bomber. That was the theory that was being pushed around, where that was some plant, that the reason that they haven't arrested somebody is because the person who did it was a plant. They were working for the FBI. They were working for the government. And the reason that we don't know about them is because, of course, they didn't even catch him in the first place because he was working for him. And so this was a theory that was being spread around a lot by Trump supporters. Now, officials say that they have, after a fresh review of evidence, after they looked through the evidence again and they got some new pieces, that they were able to figure out the identity of somebody involved, and they were even able to go find them, grab them, locate them, and make the arrest. For years, the person who planted pipe bombs at the Republican and Democratic National Party headquarters the night before rioters took over the Capitol remained a mystery. On Thursday, federal investigators announced a major breakthrough in the January 5th, 2021 case. Brian Cole Jr., 30, was arrested and charged with transporting an explosive device and attempting malicious destruction by means of explosive materials, according to charging documents filed Thursday afternoon. Attorney General Pam Bondi credited investigators and prosecutors for sifting through evidence that had been sitting at the FBI. There were no new tips that led to the arrest, Bondi told reporters at a news conference on a previously stalled case. This investigation is ongoing. As we speak, search warrants are being executed, and there could be more charges to come. Well, President Donald Trump pardoned hundreds of J6 rioters on his first day back in office, including one charged with setting off an explosive device during a battle between the pro-Trump mob and law enforcement officers in the Capitol's Lower West Tunnel. The language of the pardon did not appear to extend to the persons who planted the pipe bombs. A former J6 prosecutor said they expected a defense lawyer to argue the pardons did apply to the conduct. The thought, though the pipe bombs were found on the day of the J6 riot, officials have not yet identified a motive. FBI Co-Deputy Director Dan Bongino, who led the investigation, criticized the Biden administration for focusing on other things and said he created a multi-agency team to re-examine the evidence that led to a suspect. You're not going to walk into our capital city, out down 24 explosive devices, and walk off into the sunset. Not going to happen. We're going to track this person to the end of the earth. There was no way he was getting away. Bongino, in a 2024 episode on a podcast, claimed that the pipe bomb was an inside job to stop Trump. This was a setup. I have zero doubt, he said. Now, look, this investigation has taken a long time. They've asked the public for help in this case on multiple occasions. If you know the dude's 5'7", they looked through like over 2,500 local shoe soles to see if they could find the pattern of the prints that were made near the RNC and the DNC headquarters. So they were doing everything they can to match the shoes, to match his height, to match his clothing, doing whatever they could to figure it out, and they couldn't. And it wasn't that they got some big new piece of evidence, but a re-examination of the existing evidence allowed them to find the suspect and detain the suspect. So I gotta say that this is a good thing. It's a good thing that this person got arrested, and I hope he is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But I do have to say, when I hear the administration bragging about it, like for example, Director of the FBI, Kash Patel, just the language that they use and the tone that they use, I can't help but internally roll my eyes to some degree, considering how they've treated everybody else who acted with violence on that day.
General, when you attack American citizens, when you attack our institutions of legislation, when you attack our nation's capital, you attack the very being of our way of life. And this FBI and this Department of Justice stand here to tell you that we will always refute it and combat it. We will provide the safest country the nation has ever seen under President Trump's leadership here. And that's what we did here today with great resolve on a case, General.
When you attack our nation's capital, when you attack our institutions, when you attack American citizens, these are all things that were done by dozens upon dozens upon dozens, outside of the hundreds of people who were charged generally for, storming the Capitol building itself, but dozens of people were charged with violent crimes attacking American citizens on January 6th, attacking police officers on January 6th. Those people were pardoned. There were people who attacked our Capitol on January 6th. Those people were pardoned. There were people who attacked our institutions during the peaceful transfer of power, specifically designed to try to interfere with that process. Those people were pardoned. There were people who planned this entire operation, calling, the Capitol building, the Winter Palace on chat messaging groups, trying to figure out the best way to overthrow the United States government. Those people were pardoned. So it's very strange to sit here and now listen to the same administration that said on the campaign trail that they would not pardon the most violent criminals of J6 before doing it, that now they care about the attack on our institutions. Now they're institutionalists all of a sudden. Now they care about attacks on American citizens. Now they care about attack on police officers. Now they care about the attack on institutions and our nation's capital after they've pardoned everybody else who participated in it. The reason why this person isn't covered by the pardon, and this is probably the only reason that they're not going to be let go, is because he was not arrested up to this point. If he was arrested a year ago, maybe he would have been included in the pardon. I mean, if these are the three standards by which the American government determines attack on American citizens, attack on institutions, and attack on a nation's capital, that makes this man a threat, that therefore you cannot just do that and I quote, walk away, then there's a lot of other people that should not have been pardoned and should have been left to stay in a prison cell and live out the remainder of their sentence. But this is the only person who got it. And why is it that this is the only person who got it? Not only due to the bad timing for them, but also, as was talked about by NBC News, Dan Bongino and many other people's obsession with proving that this man was an inside agent, that this man was working for either the FBI or the CIA or some other type of, cloak and dagger organization in order to manipulate the American public through the dastardly actions we saw on the TV to turn them against Trump. Mind you, Trump had already lost the election. Trump was already on his way out, and Trump was already not polling fantastically. After January 6th, he polled worse, but I mean, he wasn't that lower than where he is now in the polling. He's at 36 now. After J6, he was roughly where he is now. So if that was the purpose of the operation, I mean, it seems that just allowing Trump to be Trump achieved the same thing. Seems like a lot of risk, a lot of cover up with not much evidence to show for it, really no evidence to show for it. Why? It doesn't make any sense. But Dan Bongino, the deputy director of the FBI, which is meant to stop terrorist attacks on this country, said that he was sure, like it was told to him from the heavens above, he was 100% positive, absolutely positive that that man was an inside agent. Now they have him. They have the 30-year-old. Now they actually have to interview him. Now they have to debrief him. Now, I'm assuming that this is actually the suspect, and we're not going to have a Kash Patel situation after Charlie Kirk shooting where we have one suspect and we have to let him go. Then we have another suspect and we have to let him go. Because I won't put it past this FBI to make a big public show of having a suspect before then immediately letting them go, because that's the scandal that Kash Patel engaged in that led to him not even being allowed to talk to the public, where they put him on a timeout, where he had to sit there in his woman's FBI jacket, look it up, being absolutely quiet because the White House has basically put a zip on his mouth because they didn't want him to say anything that could be used by Charlie Kirk's assassin to defend themselves in court when he talks about where people were or what happened exactly on the day of. Because if you say something that's wrong and his court and, his defense could say, hey, the director of the FBI said I was here at that time, but I wasn't. You could end up really compromising the case against Charlie Kirk's assassin. You really could. And so that led to the administration telling him to shut up after he made all that effort to get down there to where Charlie Kirk had been shot. So I wouldn't put it absolutely past them for this to be, not the bomber. But I think odds are, after making a big show of this and after Kash Patel's previous mess-ups, that it probably is. And so now they're going to have to present to the public. What were their motivations, which we so far do not know? How did they carry this out? Were there any other parties that worked with them? Because so far, all we know of is one arrest. So if the idea that this was some cell of some intelligence organization, or this was some terror cell or something along those lines, we don't have any other arrests to prove that so far. We only have one arrest. That doesn't mean that that one arrest can't lead to other arrests, but we only have one arrest. So soon, we're going to have Dan Bongino come out again and might have to go about face. He went about face on Jeffrey Epstein. He went about face on a few things. He might have to go about face once more on the pipe bomber. But more than anything, I'm happy that the guy has been detained so he doesn't try something like that again come next election. Do. You know what? Steve Rosenberg segment. Why not? I feel like it. Wait, let's see. Has he released anything else? Nope. Just this one.
At the start of what could be a key week of diplomacy, with US officials due in Moscow, what are the Russian papers saying this morning on the prospects for a deal to end Russia's war on Ukraine? Well, if you read the editorial in Nezavisima Gazeta, the chances of Moscow compromising are low. Will Trump's envoys be able to convince Putin to accept their plan? Geopolitical reality means we shouldn't count on Russia making noticeable concessions. No illusions. But there is always room for a miracle. The gist of this piece is that the West is to blame for the war in Ukraine and for undermining the rules-based international order, and that Russia has the staying power that the West doesn't. After nearly 4 years of the special military operation, Russia's war in Ukraine, after the transition of Russia's economy, finances and politics to a war footing, it is not impossible to convince Russians to tighten their belts, to ensure the complete and unconditional surrender of Kiev and its allies. And already on the final ruins of Kiev and the rules-based order, start building a new European security architecture from the position of strength of the victor. All of the above should be borne in mind by those who are trying to predict the outcome of Vladimir Putin's talks with Trump's envoys. No illusions, but there is always room for a miracle. The message coming out of Moscow in recent days has been that Russia is ready to fight on if it doesn't get the deal it wants. Look at what Izvestia writes, quoting a Russian diplomat. As the conflict develops, the conditions for Kiev inevitably deteriorate, and the prospects for negotiations will depend on the willingness of the Ukrainian side to prioritize ending the bloodshed. See how reality is turned upside down here. It was Russia that invaded Ukraine. Russia continues to wage war on Ukraine, and yet here a Russian diplomat claims that peace depends on Ukraine ending the bloodshed. And see how Izvestia presents the current peace talks. The peace plan proposed by the American side, which involves a cessation of hostilities and a transition to a political settlement, creates a rare opportunity to stabilize the situation. However, it is Kiev that demonstrates the greatest unwillingness to compromise, and without that, an end to the conflict seems unlikely. One of the central points of the document is the recognition of the new territorial arrangement that has developed. What is proposed is confirming the status of Crimea and the Donbass, as well as fixing the line of contact in the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. These provisions reflect the actual situation on the ground and are intended to resolve the issue of further escalation around these territories. Ukraine categorically rejects such proposals. When Izvestia refers to the status of the Donbass, no mention that Russia does not control all of the Donbass, that Moscow is demanding Ukraine hand over territory Russia has failed to seize militarily in 4 years of war. If the latest peace initiative comes to nothing, Russia will almost certainly blame Ukraine for that and encourage the Trump administration to do the same. Moskovsky Komsomolets seems pleased that when it comes to these peace talks, Europe is not at the table. Europe has reached the event horizon of a black hole. Cross it, and there's no way back. The EU will lose its identity in international relations. Its opinion on the Russian-Ukrainian peace process is no longer invited by the real parties of the conflict, Russia and the US. So European resistance to the peace process will only grow, and it's impossible to predict how it will end. With a split inside the EU, the cracks have already started. With Europe being drawn into a direct conflict with Russia, there are too many hypotheticals. Everything is changing too quickly and chaotically. The Russian government paper Rossiyskaya Gazeta claims that Washington doesn't even want to see the counter-proposal which they attempted to draw up in European capitals in response to US peace initiatives. But despite no obvious signs of compromise by Moscow, could there be an agreement this week? Some kind of deal? Remember, that Nezavisima Gazeta editorial did suggest there's always room for a miracle. Miracles aside, Rossiyskaya Gazeta does ask this question: will plans lead to Budapest? In other words, is this building up to a peace summit in Budapest? While noting that...
Could you imagine?
Occurred is occurred.
Could you imagine?
Patches gave Blue Monkey a Tier 4 subscription. Blue Monkey has probably been here more often than I in the last month. He deserves the perp, and I the derp. Alas, I did not choose overtime.
Overtime chose me. Thank you so much for the Tier 4 sub in site chat, which is the best way to finance the show, best way to finance or freelance on-the-ground war journalism, as all the money goes to the show. None of the money goes to Jeff Bezos. None of the money goes to Twitch or YouTube executives. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Blue Monkey has been here for quite a while. Has been a real dieharder, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it. This statement, though, is it leading to a Budapest 2.0? On its face, of course, the Ukrainians would reject it. Not only due to the idea that Budapest is how we got here. The first Budapest agreement, which was agreed in the 90s in exchange for Ukraine giving up their atomic arsenal, they would get territorial recognition by the United States and Russia. A lot good that did. Even when it comes to the commitment for America coming in and defending them when it comes to their territorial sovereignty. So I don't think the Ukrainians are going to want it just due to how it went, but also just the symbolism of it is politically toxic in Ukraine. Not only due to the image that how Viktor Orban, the image that Viktor Orban's created of himself, of how the Hungarian governments have made themselves quite adversarial to the nation state being invaded, but also just due to the symbolism of it being another Budapest. People know what Budapest 1 was. People consider it in Ukraine a betrayal. They're not going to accept it on its face, and therefore it doesn't have a chance of moving forward. It seems that there's a lot more concentration on the Russians won't accept this, so it doesn't have a chance. Very little time spent in the other direction, and I think that has led to the Trump administration being a little bit more hopeful about how some of these agreements are going to be looked at, especially when it comes to Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Elbridge Colby, Driscoll, or any of these ilk. J.D. Vance, since this last peace push was his initiative.
The concrete parameters of possible agreements are still unclear. The newspaper does go on to report that after talks in the US delegation led by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will go to Moscow, and if the proposals they bring are acceptable to Russia, then one could talk of a peace summit in Budapest. Is this one of the reasons Viktor Orban visited Moscow last Friday? As Komsomolskaya Pravda reports, Hungary's Prime Minister told Vladimir Putin that Hungary is ready to provide a platform for talks and help bring the peace process to a successful conclusion.
Just not possible. There's a lot of countries that can be the mediator. It's part of the reason why I don't think the United States should be serving the mediator role. They should be serving a role of one of the actors on the Ukrainian side to shape the battlefield, to make it so it's more likely that we actually have peace. But if we're going to have mediators, it can't be the Hungarians. The Ukrainians just don't trust them enough. And after Budapest 1, they don't want Budapest 2. Not interested. So I think a country like Oman, a more typical international mediator, would make a lot more sense. Or even the Turks. Though so far that hasn't come with much success, the Istanbul talks. Besides, what did the Russians say? We can fight you for 21 years. In reference to the wars with the Swedes hundreds of years ago.
Talking of miracles, that word pops up again on the front page of Nezavisima Gazeta today. Russia's October economic miracle. However, abnormal growth in one autumn month did not reduce the risks of a recession in 2026. Official statistics recorded a real economic miracle in Russia. In 1 month, domestic industry increased production by almost 11%. Such unprecedented growth rates of production are put down to a jump in the production of defense goods, as well as extraction and oil refining. But a more plausible explanation is the peculiarities of accounting. Similar anomalies were observed before, in December each year, when enterprises collectively reported on the implementation of all production plans. At the same abnormal rate, plus 11% a month, it's not only production in Russia that is growing, so is the volume of unpaid wages. Despite the October industrial miracle, the risk of a recession in 2026 in Russia has not decreased. It's actually increased, independent economists say. The general economic malaise is still betrayed by the rise in non-payment of wages, as well as by the deterioration in the general financial performance of enterprises.
Russian state media predictions for Russian economy. Not fantastic. I am curious. I do kind of want to hear what Tom Cotton said when he came out of that meeting. Or actually, you know what? Because the way that we talked about it, because that one guy, I can't remember his name, but he said it so confidently, like, oh, it's legal. Of course it's legal. So curious. 1 second. Briefing. Maybe it'll come up if I just look at briefing. It is the most recent briefing I can think of. Here it is. This is what I was talking about during the debate. The different, the looks on the face of those who left the meeting when it comes to whether or not it was a war crime and the nature of the strike. Not even just whether or not Pete Hegseth gave the order, but still whether it was a crime.
I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to The Takeout. The explanations from President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have been at times vague and halting. Hegseth even invoked fog of war as a cover for blurry details. That left Congress to call on military commanders for clarity about what happened on September 2nd off the coast of Venezuela, when numerous U.S. military airstrikes hit a vessel carrying drugs, and in what fighting conditions survivors of the first strike were left in. Democrats and Republicans emerged afterward and agreed on 3 things. Drugs were on the boat. The defense secretary did not say kill them all or issue a no quarter order. Also, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs Dan Kane and Special Operations Commander Admiral Frank Bradley answered every question and retained bipartisan support and confidence. From there, opinions diverge. After watching video footage of the strikes, Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton met with reporters.
I want to thank Admiral Bradley and General Kane for coming to brief about the strikes on September 2nd, which were righteous strikes. I saw 2 survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs down for the United States, back over, so they could stay in the fight. And potentially, given all the context we heard...
I'm sorry, what's this language, stay in the fight? They're drug smugglers. What's the fight? Smuggling, making money? What is stay in the fight? They're not attacking American personnel. They're smuggling drugs. I don't know what the use of the language to make them sound like combatants makes me uncomfortable.
Other narco-terrorist boats in the area coming to their aid to recover their cargo and recover those narco-terrorists. And just like you would blow up a boat off of the Somali coast or the Yemeni coast, and you'd come back and strike it again if it still had terrorists and it still had explosives or missiles.
Explosives or missiles. There's a lack of explosives and missiles to make it like if you had explosives or missiles in the scenario.
Admiral Bradley and Secretary Hegseth did exactly what we would expect them to do.
Cotton also said a wide array of military legal advisors watched the attack and signed off.
This was witnessed by literally hundreds of uniformed and civilian personnel at the Pentagon, at Fort Bragg, at other installations. Dozens of them were lawyers. Everybody was watching. Everybody had seen the intelligence and the legal basis leading up to these strikes.
Democrats saw something more troubling. Here's Delaware Democratic Senator Chris Coons.
I think it'd be hard to watch this series of videos and not be troubled by it. So I don't reach the same conclusion that Senator Cotton does if you're describing it as righteous.
Coons also described what occurred in the second, third, and fourth strikes.
In a second strike, they were killed, and in a third and fourth strike, the boat was sunk.
And this is Connecticut Congressman Jim Himes, top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee.
What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have 2 individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States. Any American who sees the video that I saw will see the United States military attacking shipwrecked sailors. Bad guys, but attacking shipwrecked sailors. Now, there's a whole set of contextual items that the Admiral explained. Yes, they were carrying drugs. They were not in the position to continue their mission in any way.
We turn now to Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill to summarize the day. A lot happened, Nicole. Take it away.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think you summarized it pretty succinctly as well. I mean, look, there was some consensus on the part of lawmakers who...
Like the way that one Democrat from Connecticut was talking is like as if he just watched murder. And it's just hard to hear that tone and know that the footage has still not been released. I don't know why it shouldn't at this stage, why it shouldn't be released in its entirety. We've released footage before of these strikes. So I find it hard to believe that we would be releasing some sort of strategically significant information, something that could endanger U.S. personnel.
Did appreciate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, for coming in, Admiral Mitch Bradley, Frank Mitch Bradley, for coming in as well, obviously being the one who carried out those strikes. We did try to ask them questions as they briefed lawmakers, but unsurprisingly, they did not respond to our questions, including those we asked about whether Admiral Bradley takes responsibility for those incidents. But that being said, there were diverging views over really that point and that report, which emanated initially from the Washington Post about these 2 survivors following the initial boat strike, and whether or not they were, just clinging out there for their lives or whether they were trying to get back onto that boat and, cover up whatever drugs they had. So there were some disparities in terms of, lawmakers, as you mentioned, some who felt that the video was disturbing, wanted more clarity around the circumstances, others who feel that Admiral Bradley did what he was supposed to do. That being said, this was just a select group of lawmakers that were briefed, just the leaders of, House and Senate Armed Services, House and Senate Intelligence panels, and a few other select lawmakers. So I did have a chance to speak with the head of the Senate Armed Services Committee today, Roger Wicker, and I asked him if he anticipates more briefings, more hearings. He said that he believes that there are other lawmakers who would like to be briefed. So whether or not that transpires in the future remains to be seen. But he did feel relatively satisfied by today's briefing, who he attributed to both experienced and capable leaders. So obviously, these investigations will continue on the part of House and Senate Armed Services. And like I said, whether or not we see additional briefings or hearings, I think remains to be seen.
Senator Wicker is a key figure on all of this because it was his curiosity about this that led to the briefing in the very first place on a bipartisan basis. Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill, thank you very much.
Yeah, and as long as we're getting reactions like that, I want more answers. I want to see the footage. I don't think just calling it righteous like Tom Cotton did and saying they wanted to continue the fight, whatever that means, is enough to divert the questions that we have. It's not even close. Not even on the same planet. Not even in the same atmosphere. There is one thing I wanted to maybe talk about before we wrapped up, prepared for tomorrow's stream, as we cover all the rest of the news we have yet to cover and catch up on. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about the Russian oil trade with India and how Trump is increasing some pressure with sanctions on that, which seems to be the only avenue by which Trump is increasing pressure on the Russians at this stage, what it means and if it'll be sufficient. So we'll be covering that tomorrow. But the last thing I wanted to cover today is the results from Tennessee. So in Tennessee, the Democrats lost an election by 8 to 9 points. Now, that on its face doesn't sound that remarkable for Democrats. In fact, you would say, sounds like you lost. But when you consider the fact that the last midterm we had a comparable turnout to the special election, and due to the amount of money spent on the Democratic and Republican side, we actually did have quite a lot of turnout that made it comparable to the 2022 midterm election. There was a 13-point swing in favor of the Democrats. Trump won the district by 22 points. Democrats lost the district in yesterday's election, in the election that just happened, by 9 points. That's quite a shift. And if you were to extrapolate that out from that election and to assume a similar shift or a shift even a little similar to that, then there's a lot of purple districts that then become blue. And then there's a lot of districts that lean red that might even lean blue, and some districts that might have before been red, just straight up red districts that might now be in play. Maybe not lean blue. Maybe it's red, now it leans red. Before it was lean red, now it's a toss-up. Before it was a toss-up, now it leans blue to it is blue. Now, that is already significant enough. But in the I guess you could say, in the conversation that's going on in the Democratic Party right now, there's another conversation happening about this election, and that's why she performed this way. Some people are talking about it being a general trend for special election results, but other people have suggested that this is because this specific candidate was a progressive. That this was a progressive in Tennessee, and even though she lost, she performed much better than the previous candidate for this seat in Tennessee that the Democrats put forward. And this shows that a progressive agenda against what some, political strategists might believe actually could play quite well in rural America and could play quite well in red country. Because it's a question of populism is a question of speaking to the economic affordability interests of the people in the district. And if you speak to it from a progressive angle that challenges the establishment, you can speak to a same type of we need great ambitious change desire that helped get Trump elected in the first place. At least that is me steel manning the argument to the best of my ability. Now, I don't know if I believe it. It's not that I don't believe that you can make progressive policy recommendations or offers in red districts and get support. There are areas where you can do that. For example, even though I wouldn't call this progressive policy making, this is very base centrist, just trying to maintain the system, make sure people can survive where we are. But the extension of the Obamacare tax credits is supported by overwhelming majority of Americans, 75% of Americans, but also a majority of Trump voters, because this is something that directly affects them. I'm sure also if we could point to issues that could deal with making sure that every American has health care, the majority of Americans, the vast majority of Americans, want every American to have health care. And that's part of the reason why Bernie did so well, is he offered a transformative vision. And so I do think that can play well in red districts. There's a reason why Bernie won in West Virginia and Hillary didn't. But I also think that as you get the image of a progressive, there are certain other things you have to sign on to that might hurt your image, whether it has to do with aggressive gun control, whether it has to do with assumptions on social beliefs and how you want to shove things down people's throats that could lead to you losing. Because a lot of times it's not even that people are like, oh, I want to go around and tell gay people how to live their life, or I want to tell other people how to raise their kids. It's, I'm scared that this is going to be taught to my kids, forced down our throat in our school, and it's just going to be what we're told to believe. And that motivates people to go out there. And it's not even the idea that this will be a belief that is shared. It's the idea that this will be the only belief that is allowed. Is this always the case? No. But whether or not it's always the case, this is the image that a lot of Democrats have, and they have to fight off. And so if that's the image you have to run against, if that's the image that the opposition's ads are going to run against you, you have to deal with that if you want to run as progressive in these areas. Now, those are things they're going to throw at you if you run as a Democrat, period. But they want to associate you with Mondami. They want to associate you with AOC. They want to associate you with values that are not in their image, in the view and the framing that they've put up, family values. So I think that if you can pitch certain progressive anti-establishment policy ideas around healthcare, around bringing down people's costs, helping with affordability, I think that this can play well, but there's so many things that people just assume once you come for that angle that you sign on to, and certain labels like socialist and communist that are attached to it that make it politically toxic in rural communities. So whether or not I could argue from a progressive position, like, hey, expanding the cabling in these communities is helpful, and try to expand broadband in rural communities, this is an important cause. We're talking about winning elections. We're not talking about policy wonkery. And when I look at the results from previous special elections, mind you, 13 points is still a big victory. The swings in other special elections, including where they ran moderates, and a lot of these runs were bigger than in the Tennessee race. Again, we're dealing with a 13-point swing in Tennessee in April, 22-point swing, a 22.6 swing, and a 16.1 swing, April 1st. Then you go to the September special elections, the one on September 9th and the one on September 23rd, 16.2, 17.4. Then you go to November 4th. This was the last special election before this recent special election. 28.4 swing. The average swing here up until this recent special election result was more than 20 points, just over. So at this stage, can we confidently say that this woman outperformed because she was a progressive? No. Could that be part of the reason why she spoke to that community? And that was, she was able to get into the single digits when they were in the 20s historically? Maybe it helped in that instance, but the data just does not make that clear. The data does not bear that out. Some of these candidates are progressives. Some of these candidates are moderates. The only thing that we can say the data clearly shows is that people are dissatisfied with Republicans. People do not think that the economic deal that they were offered on the campaign trail is being delivered upon. And Trump is polling worse on the economy right now than he has ever polled. He's polling negatively on foreign policy. And he's even a few points under on immigration, which is something that is a big shift in the United States. He has lost a lot of the crowds that he's won going into this election, whether that's to do with the Hispanic population or young people, where he did actually make some inroads. And so I think that this all points to a negative outcome towards the midterms. The Democrats winning these special elections continues to point towards a positive outcome for Democrats, negative for Republicans. But I don't see anything that says progressives are doing much better in that respect. So far, we have Mondami, which is a race in New York City against a sex pest and a dude wearing a beret. Okay? So, not even talk about fucking Eric Adams, Turkey's favorite soldier. So there's a question as to the quality of the opposition, and whether, even if we did put him up against the best of the best that the centrists had to offer within the Democratic Party, even if he did perform well, can you really extrapolate New York to the rest of the country? The rest of the country is not New York. So I think that so far, whether it comes to the idea that progressives running these districts better, I think it all depends on the individual messaging of the progressive. I think it depends on what needs you're trying to speak to in those local community. But so far, the big constant here in all these wins is you're not MAGA. And that the Democrats that are winning and are winning by big margins speak to affordability, which can be progressive, it can be centrist. You could even make it a Republican talking point if you're going to say that affordability issue comes from high taxes or the affordability issue comes from overregulation. So I think trying to come to a consensus right now on progressivism being the factor can't. Okay. And I think with that, I think that's everything I'm going to cover today. I'll be back tomorrow so we can cover the trade of oil between India and Russia and Trump's tariffs on it. We'll also talk about Japan's ruling on same-sex marriage. It's Supreme Court ruling. We'll probably touch a little bit as well on the situation around Pokrovsk, whether or not the Russians announced that they took Pokrovsk. Have they taken Pokrovsk? As well as some information about the financial wheeling and dealing in the back rooms, as it seems that people in Trump's inner circle are trying to profit off of the Ukraine-Russia peace deal. So please do tune into tomorrow's stream. Besides that, if you want to help support my freelance war journalism, I'm going to be headed back to Ukraine next year, and I would like to make sure that I have the funds to do so. You go to DylanBurns.tv and donate, or DylanBurns TV on Patreon, become a recurring supporter. You can also take your Amazon Prime at no cost to you, connect it to your Twitch account, and gift it in the Twitch chat at zero cost to you, but it supports freelance on-the-ground war journalism. If you want to follow my social media, DylanBurns1776, or DylanBurns TV on Instagram, DylanBurns1776 on Twitter, DylanBurns TV on Instagram for my pictures on the time, on the ground, following the war, or DylanBurns TV on Blue Sky and Twitter if you want official channel updates. If you want to join the Discord, scroll beneath today's stream, click the Discord link, and be sure to join. We have a pretty good Ukraine-Russia updates channel. Hope you check it out. We also have a DylanBurns TV Reddit. I wanted to be more active, but I got to work on it a little bit. Anyway, you guys have a good one. See you guys tomorrow. Expect an article from Offbeat Research released in the near future. Good night and good luck, everyone.